So if there have been any ex parte communications to the council members since the first reading of this matter, those should be disclosed at this time.
Council members, any ex parte?
Yes, I have with the applicant.
No.
And I've had none. Council, we've had one ex parte disclosure.
That will not impact your decision-making this evening as far as, base your decision based upon what you hear at this public hearing.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, are you ready to proceed with your presentation?
Mayor, this was approved at the last meeting, so there was no additions to this item. So staff is going to put up a map to kind of remind where this item was, the location map of this. And
Can you just hit just a couple of high points?
That's it, Mayor.
Okay.
And then the applicant is also here as well. So Mr. Hoover will kind of summarize a couple high points and where the property is located.
Go ahead, Mr. Hoover, your pleasure.
Good evening, everyone. This master plan development is along both sides of US 1, and on the north arrow is at the upper left part of the screen. It's 4,579 acres altogether, and it extends from the Florida East Coast Railroad basically over to I-95. And then on the south, it's on the north side of Hargrove Grade Industrial Park, and then it goes up to about Old Kings Road. Here's a slide we showed last time. And basically, there's 7 residential projects in this project, DRI, and then there's 2,300 homes that are under development, or some people have already moved in, as well as 2 commercial projects.
So those are the high points you wanted to head? So I guess I would ask, does the applicant have anything that they wanted to say at this point, or are you here for questions?
Thank you, Mayor. Michael Schmento for the applicant. Nothing's changed since the last time, and we'll be available to answer any questions that you may have or that come up from the public.
Okay. So let's go to City Council first. Just to underscore, Mr. Hoover, what you said, this is the culmination of a DRI that was approved 20 years ago.
Right, and so the DRI was approved on May 16th. It only has 1 hearing, and the MPD has 2 hearings since it's an ordinance.
Okay. All right, so I will ask City Council questions regarding the presentation.
I have no questions.
I don't have any questions, just comment when we're ready, unless you want me to go ahead and make comment now, Mayor.
It's up to you.
So my issue continues to be with this MPD is a lack of industrial. I understand that we've added some option for industrial on some of these tracts of land, but I continue to be concerned with the lack of focus on really improving what is kind of pad ready in our city for industrial. So I'm looking at the map that's on the screen right now, and we have this legend that shows the color blue for industrial, and you can see on this very large MPD that will run up and down a thoroughfare with no industrial. So that continues to be a concern of mine. I will be making a motion to specifically address that, but I'll wait until public comment to do so.
Okay. Any other comments by City Council at this time? So seeing none, let me open this up for the public. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this ordinance at this time? Yes, sir.
Robert McDonald, Palm Coast. How many houses or residential units are we going to build? 2,300? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it's going to be on the west side of US 1. Okay, my biggest question is, what are we going to do for fire protection? We had a long way on a fire engine to get to these houses. We're going to build 2,300 houses, and we got a long way, because unless I'm incorrect, and the chief is sitting behind me, the closest firehouse is going to be either off of Belt's Hair, or it's going to be the one by Coles. and that's a long haul. So you might want to reconsider this with 2,300 houses. That's a lot of houses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief, do you want to make a brief comment? And just generally, if you could reference concurrency, just so.
Yes, sir. So, Mr. McDonald is correct that the two closest stations are Station 21, which is by Coles along the Palm Coast Parkway corridor, and then Station 23 that's in the north end across from the two schools there in Belterre Burroughs area. And this area will essentially, so the growth of this area will generate some impact fees that will help us determine how we move westward in protecting the fire department. Station 23, that is the northernmost station, is in calendar year 2022 was our slowest station at around 1,500 calls. So there is some room for it to absorb some additional impact that will certainly feel from this location. We are continuing to watch this area to see that we stay within our response times goals associated with this. But we believe that the growth in this situation will generate enough impact fee to help us with our vision as we move forward to continue to protect the folks that are in these areas.
So I just want you to be able to give the public some confidence that you all are well ahead of any of these development plans in terms of your planning for the future. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. In our 10-year plan, one of the first things we identified was how are we going to grow? So we have a station growth methodology report. We've talked about it in council many times. Each of you have seen us present it, and we're currently in the process of doing some updates to see, what are our next steps, because that's 3.5 years old at this point. But to continue to look, but essentially the methodology of what the triggers are for us to say it's time to do more and to do something additional are in place.
Thank you for your comments.
Chief, I do just have one question then. So just to confirm, is this area in 23's first due?
It's in both of those two stations' first due. I would say the southern aspect of this DRI will be in Station 21's first due. And then the vast majority of this will be in Station 23's first due. And as we go west, we don't necessarily know where all the streets are platted yet. We're working together with the community development team, with Mr. Hoover, with Mr. Tyner, with Mr. DiLorenzo, to be ahead of knowing where when we put a fire station, we don't necessarily want to put one like in a corner. We want to put one that provides the most coverage area. And we have a few ways that we determine that. We determine that by driving miles, by our predictive data with using GIS technology of how long it takes us to get to these places. And we also predict it with population and demographics too. There's certain demographics or certain types of occupancies that require additional fire protection. And all of that is accounted for in our impact fee as we grow, as we expand in new things.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Any other questions from City Council at this time? Then let me, the public is welcome to come forward. Go ahead, pull it down. It won't hurt you. There you go.
I'm concerned about the electric grid. Are these houses going to be required to have solar panels on them to help with the electricity demand? Anyone?
I can answer that. No, there's nothing in the DRI that requires the property owner to put up solar. That's, up to each individual person.
So, Mr. Hoover, to the resident's question, is there any concern that FPO would not have sufficient resources to provide electricity to these homes?
Well, they get to review these subdivision plans, and so they know how fast growth is occurring.
Once again, a part of the overall concurrency consideration. Correct. Okay. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'm just curious, this is kind of what I was talking about. Everyone is in favor of growth to some extent, but are we ready? I mean, do us as citizens, do we get a chance to have a say in this? I didn't hear many questions. I know this is the second read, but what are the impact fees for us? What are the impacts for us? Like I live in District 3 off Royal Palms and Point Pleasant. To get over to the other side of the road when I go on a bike ride with my kids. it can be very difficult. Like that's an instance where maybe there could be a crosswalk there, or, are we growing to the point where there is not, we're not being smart about it? I mean, when I look at this, the more the merrier. I understand it helps grow the city, it helps us bring more people, it gives revenue to our districts. But are we ready? I mean, what about the schools? I mean, before school started this year, because I work in public education to some degree, there was complaints about not having enough room. Kids were getting put into, outside buildings because there just wasn't enough room. So, I mean, what are the impacts to us as residents? Are those being considered when we're just saying yes to people who want to come and build, which I think all of us would love to see people build, but I have kids, what's the future for my children? Like all that stuff, it kind of comes into play because, we are building and we're growing rooftops, but are we creating jobs in the city? Is there space for that as we, change green spaces into more residential area? We're very welcoming to people, commercial builders and people who want to build these big residential areas. And we're trying to attract these businesses, but at the same time, what are the outside repercussions or the unintended consequences? Are those being considered by the council before we just say yes to more people? And I that's why I'm saying, do we get a voice in some of these decisions? And I think that's something to be considered.
Thank you for your comment. Mr. Tyner, I'm going to throw this back to you again, and I'd like you to reinforce the theme on concurrency, that the process that you all go through to get to this point this evening. If you can just, summarily mention the many, many steps, because the theme of most of the questions have to do with, have these various effects been well considered in advance of a project like this?
Yes, Mayor, and council, and you may recall at our last meeting on this item, I did a pretty lengthy introduction on what a development of regional impact is. So it's a 20-year plan. So when someone's new to the process, they don't realize that this was actually approved in 2004. And as part of the development of regional impact analysis, it's quite a lengthy process. Not only does the City of Palm Coast review it, other agencies review this large plan as well. But just as far as the impacts itself, this developer, again, Florida Department of Transportation, the City of Palm Coast, analyzed this back in 2004 and before that on traffic models to see what those transportation impact fees or transportation impacts would be on the roadway network. So as part of that negotiation, for example, the developer had paid over $7 million before they even put a shovel in the ground to pay for potential impact fees or to pay for transportation improvements, such that went to Matanzas interchange. And in addition, they are still, every single home that is being constructed there or any business is still paying transportation impact fees.
And additionally, this plan has been through the school district and
Absolutely.
already received their approval with regard to their forecasted concurrency requirements.
Yes, not only are each lot would still have to pay, a residential unit will still have to pay the school impact fees, but also during that period, it was negotiated based on those impacts. There's actually a school site that's dedicated right on US 1
Right.
as well.
And just to summarize, I had mentioned earlier, and I will continue to offer this up as frequently as I can, this opening up and review of the city's present and future comprehensive plan will be the day one of a plan like this from 20 years ago, where residents will have the input to suggest what the city should look like as we step forward. So that would be the review facilitated by a professional of the comprehensive plan, which again will be a 2-year process, and everyone will have a chance, and we invite everyone to participate. Are there any other members of the public that would like to address the issue at hand?
Mr. Mayor, if I could interject one more comment and try to respond to the gentleman's question as far as the scope of the community involvement. This is not, this evening, considering whether to allow the change from undeveloped land to everything you see on the screen. That, as you heard, that has happened already in 2004. In fact, this is the Fifth Amendment. So what we're doing is not approving everything. We're just changing some things that have already received some approvals and have vested rights. So there's been a whole lot of public hearings that are open to every member of the public to come over the course of the year since 2004. As to this particular set of changes, there's been three meetings. One was a public participation meeting, and this is provided for and explained in your agenda item, as well as, since this is an ordinance by Chapter 166 of the Florida statutes, there have to be 2 public hearings. This is the second of those. So there's been 3 opportunities for the public to come in and hear this and give us comments, give your elected officials comments on your thoughts about this change. But this is a arguably, relatively speaking, a small change. The big development change occurred in 2004, and as you heard staff indicate, there were multiple layers of governmental review at that time.
Yes, sir.
I'm just curious, as Steve Carr, Palm. I'm curious, how is the city communicating with FDOT? Because when I look at all this building and all the traffic that's going to be coming with it, very concerned about evacuation routes during hurricanes. I've been out on I-95 when it was a parking lot and moving very slow. So what are we going to do if we have another hurricane that's going to require 2 or 3 counties to evacuate? How are the people going to get out? I mean, we're putting a lot of traffic in here. So can we get an update from FDOT on what's going to happen to facilitate helping people get out during the evacuation?
Well, I think you have every right to contact DOT about this project because they are also a public entity, but I also think you can rely on staff at your pleasure to give you an update on the study that was done and that it's well within the tolerances that are set by the Florida Department of Transportation. So I would suggest, if you will, if you start with staff, and then perhaps I can help you get in touch with folks at DOT for that kind of a question.
Okay, thank you.
Any other members of the public? Yes, sir.
Mike Martin, Matanzas Woods. Mr. Mayor, since July of 2021 you took office, as far as I know, there have been 5 rezonings from either industrial or heavy commercial to residential. Now, the council has often spoke about the desire to diversify our population, that Palm Coast should not be a retirement city anymore, that we need to bring in younger families and try to make this area younger and more vibrant and more diverse. Well, if you're going to bring anyone in who's not retired, the one essential you have to provide are jobs. So to me, it's vitally important that you look at every single development plan that comes along and make sure that there are enough industrial areas, properties there, that we can attract good paying jobs. Because if you continue to eliminate the industrial zoned areas, Palm Coast is by default going to be, remain a retirement community. So if you want to see us grow in a younger direction and bring in younger families, you always have to think jobs, jobs, jobs. And I just don't see the areas in this plan where you're going to put industrial and well-paying jobs. I think you need to make that your priority. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other members of the public would like to speak to this issue at this time? Seeing no one come forward, I will close public comment. And council, first, do you have questions of staff and or the applicant?
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
the only thing I would add, I'm not sure whether the applicant, he had reserved the request to respond to
Yeah,
any
I'm
public
asking him up
comments.
now. Okay, yep.
Just want to make sure that he had that opportunity.
Yep. Thank you.
Again, Michael Schmento for the applicant. I'll stand ready to answer any questions that you have that you want to discuss about the community's comments about that. I can address some of the questions about fire station to supplement our activities to ensure that levels of service are met, how we maintain traffic and how we monitor it.
Pull the mic a little closer so
sorry.
folks online can hear you, thanks.
Sorry. You know, how we deal with fire and how that's evaluated every other year. Traffic's the same way. We do periodic traffic studies and updates on biannual reports. So those issues are addressed. It's very complex. The first document, DRI, is about 60 pages. It's been through 9 iterations. The issue about industrial, I mean, the funny part about it is that there's been about 500,000 square feet of industrial added to this development. And there are issues that we have as a community to attract those types of things. But the city is making efforts to talk about that and job creation. I think this plan, if you want to go into it, we can show you how. As far as evacuation, there is a fire site around tract 13C that will be given to the city when they elect to accept it for a new fire station. In addition to that, we've provided right-of-way from Belterre to US 1 through that area, through tract 21, and I think it's about 13B, to provide an extra evacuation route. So all these issues are important, and I promise you, through the hours and months and almost a year of going through this, that your staff and the other agencies evaluate these things to ensure that they're acceptable to the city and the residents.
Well, while you're there, Counselor,
Yes, sir.
any questions for the applicant at this moment?
I have no questions for the applicant.
No questions.
And are you satisfied you responded to the public
Yes, sir.
comments? Very
Yes, sir.
good, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with that then, let's come to City Council comments.
No comments?
So I just want to comment, Mr. Martin, I agree with you. We've made 5 changes to this MPD since 2017, and all of them have been a conversion from business or commercial to residential of some sort. I understand that there's a trend now of not using office space the way we used to, people working from home. 65% of our businesses here in Palm Coast are home-based. But I am very concerned about Tract 17 specifically. It is low-hanging fruit for us to attract industrial. It's a great, we could put 300 jobs for light industrial on this tract alone. So I would make a motion to adjust this MPD to only allow industrial on Tract 17, which we have the authority to do. I'll hold off on that motion until other council members have been able to make comment, but I just urge this council to get very serious about our economic development efforts and really make that an industrial tract that will attract good paying jobs for our community.
Thank you. Anyone want to respond to that? I have a comment to make about that, but go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I would just like to comment also that I do feel that we need to create more jobs in the community for the amount of growth that we have right now. We do need more jobs and better paying jobs.
For sure. I think conceptually that's absolutely a sound argument to make. I think we also have great staff and economic development team that can help shed some light onto this. I think it's somewhat unprecedented as far as our council literally taking a tract and defining it as something or not. I think that we should look to staff to see whether or not the strategy behind any of that is feasible. But yeah, I understand the projections.
I don't see Barbara here, Barbara Feodor. Am I missing her, our Economic Development Director? Councilman Kluvis, I can tell you I've spoken with her about this specifically, and this tract is something that she has been actively working to attract.
So I'm aware of that as well, so let me ask a question so that we can kind of flush this out a little bit. Everyone here agrees that we desire to bring more jobs to the community. But I have to go back to a reference of a three-legged stool, which means that, one, we need to have more jobs, which requires training, and you all know we have a plan in place to brand ourselves as a healthcare services training and medical technology destination, especially for career-minded, younger people, older people, but workers that will start out careers in that field. That's been known for some time. So that's workers in training. Number 2, you have to have the businesses here to employ them. So that's 2 legs of the stool. The third leg of the stool, okay, is you have to have a place, now that you've trained these workers, where are they going to live? In other words, those three legs of the stool can't happen in some specific linear timeline. They have to happen simultaneously. So my question about this suggestion is, how will you support the workers in terms of where they'll live and get them the jobs to move in and start the process? So that's my three-legged stool. I would defer to Mr. DiLorenzo just for a minute. And jobs are very important, but can you just bring us up to date on what the unemployment rate here is in Palm Coast locally? I just want to set the bar so everybody knows where we're at. I'm not suggesting that we don't need more. We do need more, but this is the starting point. Where are we now?
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. I believe we are at 2.8%. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I am 100% sure that we're currently employing more people in Flagler County than we ever have before. But
So are we close to a historic low in unemployment?
I think that's,
Okay.
we're bouncing near that.
Now, again, doesn't mean that we don't need more. I don't want to pretend that we're playing catch up to a monster that's out there. So can you help me with that a little bit in terms of my concept of the three different pieces that need to come together?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, Mayor. First, I think that it's a very well-known fact that we have a large portion of our community that is retired and that's not in the workforce. So I don't know that that's, I applaud our low employment rate, definitely, but I also think we probably have a lower percentage of people actually in the workforce, number one. Number two, when we're talking about one tract of land, I'm not, there's a lot of mixed use, there's a lot of flex use in here, and the applicant is correct that we have added the option of industrial to some of these parcels of land. But as we grow, I mean, in this MPD, we're going from roughly 4,900 residents to 6,500. So we are adding homes. We need to be adding jobs. And not just adding the option for jobs, but actually making a commitment specifically to Tract 17, which I've talked to staff about. We are legally able to do. And I specifically will make the motion to this effect. And I think that as we do this, this shows our commitment to our residents to bring in good paying jobs, because we keep talking about having this affordable housing issue. Well, we don't have an affordable housing issue. We have a good paying jobs issue. And so I think if we can create the opportunity for industrial on this part of this MPD, we are committing to bringing in good paying jobs for our community. And not for nothing, Mayor, when we talk about light industrial, it could be creation of pharmaceuticals. I mean, it can be so many different things. So we're not necessarily going outside of this overall idea of being a medical hub and really feeding kind of all parts of that idea.
So is this a build it and they will come philosophy, that if we leave that tract vacant, that businesses will suddenly want to sprout and will create jobs?
Our economic development team has been marketing this tract very hard. So if we make it industrial, it is helping our staff to have the resources it needs to bring in the industry.
And the neighbors on both sides of the tract, that will be residential homes?
Well, if you look at this, Mayor, around Tract 17, which is up on the screen now, around it is flex use. So, and we've got a great corridor here. We've got 95 not far from here. We've got rail not far from here. And in talking with our economic development team, not far from here is actually, and it's not pictured, is actually another industrial tract. So it's not unspeakable that we put industrial, and we're not talking smokestacks. I mean, that's what everybody thinks about when they think about industrial, but that's not what light industrial is. So yes, I think it can very well be tastefully done. And I find it to be a little misleading if we're saying that we're adding the option for industrial and many other flex uses. What's the difference in adding a requirement for industrial on 17? There's going to, theoretically, there would be industrial around homes in some way, shape, or
the
form.
difference in the term requirement is you're making a grand assumption that there are those that would desire to build light industrial there. So you're making a decision on a business model which is not ours to make. In other words, that would be the decision of an entrepreneur or a company to decide that this was a viable business model. So using that word, what was the word, required to only be for this use, for me, that's a very big leap to knowing that there is somebody out there that would utilize the space in the way you think it should be utilized.
Well, and Mayor, the applicant can always come back and ask for it to be reverted back to mixed use or residential. I mean, there's nothing saying that the applicant can back in the future.
If you've got flex use on that word requirement, then I would be interested.
So the point is that we need to, it is my strong feeling that if we allow residential and industrial, we will see more residential. That is my honest, real opinion on what will happen. I know that entitlements have been converted several times from commercial to residential, and rather than really committing to our we hired an economic development director back in, September? We need to give her the tools. And yes, if you require Tract 17 to be industrial, I know we have meetings this very week, our staff does, to promote and market that tract. Okay. It is very important.
Mr. Tyner, can you give us a comment? I'm struggling with that word requirement. I'm not struggling with the concept, especially if it doesn't play out the way we, forecast it to, that there's a way back. Have you given that some consideration? Because I don't think that City Council can make a decision irrespective of what staff has probably already thought through.
Well, I think from a planning perspective, the way they set up some of these tracts in the development agreement, it's called, it's that pink color, which is a flex use, right? So within Tract 17, which we own, by the way, the City of Palm Coast owns Tract 17. So there's a flex use of commercial uses that are permitted, office, industrial, institutional was added, and also residential high density. So being a flex use, it's, the way the zoning is, any of those can
So if
be
it's already
utilized.
our decision, then we control the outcome.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
So and I'll just go ahead and make the motion.
Okay.
The motion is to I feel like no one can hear me. The motion is to alter Tract 17 to eliminate the flex use in the commercial and office and residential in the MPD, and eliminate OFC 2, COM 2, SFR 1, and MFR 2 in the LDC zoning category. What this would leave us with, except the rest of the MPD, but commit to making Tract 17 only industrial and or institutional, and take out these other uses in the MPD and take out the other uses in the LDC.
So that motion is constricting your own decision-making going forward. Is that what I'm understanding?
No, again, the applicant can always come back and ask for as it stands right now, they can put no industrial in there. That is not acceptable.
Okay.
So what we're doing is we are saying for Tract 17, we're going to take out the options for the MPD except for industrial and institutional. And for the LDC, we're taking out everything except for PSP and industrial. PSP is institutional.
And is there any data or any evidence whatsoever that light industrial use is favored or desired by anyone? I'm not familiar with it. I've seen no such data or report. I mean, what I'm worried about is, it sounds good. Is it really going to happen?
Well, if it doesn't, then the applicant's welcome to come back and motion for this to be changed again. And because we own it.
Time and an expense to them, but it is, and to us, and to the public.
But if we could go ahead and look at the ROI, Mayor, on adding 1,600 residential uses that I am willing to accept if we can get consensus from this dais to commit to 17 being industrial or institutional only.
So why don't you rephrase your motion just so it's clear?
So the motion is to accept the MPD as is with the exception of Tract 17. It would alter it to eliminate flex use, commercial, office, and residential in the MPD, and eliminate the office 2, commercial 2, single family 1, and multifamily 2 in the LDC. And that's
Okay, the motion has been stated. Counselor, do you have the motion clearly?
Yeah, I do, but I do have a question, just to get down in the weeds, and that is, this is a question for staff. As I understand the motion, and we're looking at page 10 of 40, which is what you have right there. It's the chart.
Yes, it's table 4.1.
Correct. And in the middle column, it says amended and retitled DRDO land uses. So with those changes as proposed by the motion, question for staff, would there need to be a change for that term, mixed uses, in that column, or would that can that stay the same if this motion is seconded and passed? Because I want it to be all internally consistent.
Certainly.
It could stay mixed use, right? Yeah, we believe it could stay mixed use.
Just want to make sure that it's all going to work together.
Okay, Counselor, does that get you clear on the motion?
The only thing is, would there, by doing this, would there be anything else, since second reading, is there anything to making these changes as proposed by this motion? I know we need to second it. Will this require any other changes anywhere else in the ordinance?
We think it would be that table, but if this motion is passed, we would look back at some of the text that talks about the details of tract 17
It's a big
to
ordinance.
make
I
it
just wanna
consistent
make
with
sure
this
we're
table.
capturing this change, if it passes somewhere else, that's all.
Certainly.
Just to be consistent with the table.
That's all I have.
You have to help me with that last exchange. So they're talking about having to go back and look at the language. So are we premature?
I'm not hearing that. What I would.
Not hearing that,
I think
okay.
what would happen is, going forward, if this motion is seconded and passed, there would be direction to staff to make the required changes
Okay,
to any other
understood.
portion of the ordinance that was affected by
Got
this
it.
motion.
Okay. So there is a motion on the dais now. So the next step would be, is there a second in order to consider the motion?
No second.
So Councilperson Hyder has seconded the motion, so now we'll open up to discussion. So, Councilman?
Yes. So essentially, if this is of staff's recommendation, I think we should be able to hear that from staff for sure. My question would be, what's the difference between the opportunities for light industrial on track 17 versus 5A and 5E that have been noted for industrial use?
I have that answer, and obviously staff can talk about this too. The advantage of track 17 is that the infrastructure is there. The tracks up here in the corner don't have the proper infrastructure yet. So we are not close to being able to market that, sell that. It's just not, it's not anywhere close to being ready to really be marketed, whereas track 17 is. That's a large part of it.
Mr. Mayor,
I'm sorry, I have to ask, okay. You have to help me with that. So that track 17 is ready to be marketed because of what?
There is infrastructure for power, water, drainage, the proper infrastructure in order to really be able to market that rather quickly, because time is money when we're talking about developers, commercial businesses. Track 17 is in a very good position to be marketed and for a business to come in and start making money off of it much quicker than what would have to be done to the tracks up in the corner, the 5A through 5E.
So comparing it to those, okay, understood. Councilperson? Comments?
No comment.
I'd like to have the applicant address this.
yes, that's appropriate, and for the public, it'd be an opportunity for the public to respond to. As this is a separate item, this is a motion to amend. So this is different than what either the applicant or the
Okay,
public had the
understood.
opportunity to speak to
Understood.
originally.
Again, Michael Schimento. So this is an agreement between the city and the declarant, who essentially is not the owner of all the property within the 7,000 acres, but it is the declarant. And what that means is it is responsible to ensure that a master plan is consistent, is viable, is marketable, is manageable from all the concurrency issues like traffic. Every 2 years we have to do a large traffic study. So that's my client's position is the declarant. And in the declarant, they are in control of what happens in the DRI and in the PUD. Obviously, those two agreements are negotiated between the declarant and the city, and have been and will always be. As it relates to this, just points of clarity. Ms. Pontieri and I had a conversation about this, and we agree with the intent. Our whole intent is to do what we can to add jobs to our community and to provide opportunity for outside capital to come in, invest in our community that would not only increase our tax base, but provide better paying jobs, raising those jobs value. So we're all on the same page about it. Little history. So as part of the DRI, the city has an obligation presently to develop a park on track 17. That is their obligation. It is also their obligation presently to reimburse the declarant up to $800,000 in park impact fees, okay? There are some other things, so I'm just talking about as it relates to Tract 17. So that was part of Amendment 7 and 8 and 9 of the DRI and Amendment 3 and 4 to this PUD. So presently, the city owns that tract. They are obligated presently to build a park. Simply changing it to industrial does not relieve you all from building a park on that property, but also providing $800,000 in impact fee credits. So it's much more complex than just saying, I want an industrial. We want jobs. We have been working with the city, I know you know this, the declarant, to bring a project. We had Project Alpha that was looking at it for approximately some time. So there's some complexities there. So it's not just arithmetic, it's calculus on how to do that. As it relates to what you own a parcel right now that is required. What the declarant and your staff negotiated with us during this last part is to say, hey, you can do industrial there. You can also do COM3. And I read you COM3. COM3, the purpose of COM3, general commercial, is to, sorry, my glasses are a little weak, is to provide area for general commercial, office uses, and meet the community-wide demand for retail services, business, and employment opportunities. So something to think about. Removing COM3 could also remove opportunities to put development there that might bring job opportunities. So my client is not here. I cannot consent right now to limiting that tract to only industrial. But I hope you understand that we are committed to working through this issue, which is the goal of not what it's zoned, that's one of the legs of the stool, I'll steal that, but the goal is to make a viable opportunity in Palm Coast Park, including Tract 5, for commerce opportunities. Remember also Tracts 14, 4, 13C, 13B, 13A, all have general commercial on there and some industrial opportunities. So it's not the only piece. So all I'm asking is that if the board decides that this is the direction that they want to go, that we'll need to step back and reevaluate this whole process again, because it's just, there's too many variables in this calculus. We would prefer that what was passed at the first reading and is presently in front of you to be passed with the commitment, and I know you know the developer and the declarant, and they've been with you all for 20 years, and Mr. Douglas has been here 5 days a week working with your staff on town center and these things. So I know you know that we have the commitment to working on that goal. But as I sit here today, I can't commit to that specific restrictive change on that parcel. Okay.
First of all, I want everyone to understand, my job here is just to protect the record. My job is to make sure that whatever you decide this evening on this motion to amend or in the main motion is just to make sure that the record will support that decision. I want everyone to understand that. With that said, I just have a couple questions for staff to try to clarify the comments from the applicant. And that is it the staff's understanding that the changes that are being proposed in the application to Tract 17 to add the term institutional and PSP were to comply with this requirement as has been discussed this evening, not in this document, but in another document, to put a park on this property? In other words, why for Tract 17 was this table 4.1 changed as is shown?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that. During the DRI process, there's an analysis on the level of service that's required for parks, passive and recreation. So the applicant in 2005 was obligated to donate lands, right, for such a site to fill their obligation. The applicant has fulfilled their obligation as a citywide level of service to provide that land to the city of Palm Coast. The city is not obligated, okay? They met their obligation, but the city is not obligated to make Tract 17 into a park site. Okay? Does that answer your question?
Yes, but there's a follow-up. It was stated by the applicant's representative this evening that if the city were to move forward and somehow be able to develop this as industrial, there would be consequences. He indicated that maybe that's not the right term, but there would be potential implications associated with the DRI. Because the DRI, as was stated, I could be wrong, was stated that this was to be developed as a park, and there was a reference to a refund of $800,000 in impact fees. Would this proposed change, as by this proposed amendment, change that in the DRI to require an amendment to the DRI?
No, the park impact fees with this proposal, and Bill, you may have to clear it up, back in the, there was a land exchange, and the applicant provided more parklands, okay, than that was required by the city's level of service. With this amendment, they are requesting additional residential units, which kind of ate up, so we do that analysis again.
Got it.
So during this revision, if this is approved, then we would start collecting park impact fees and not paying any park impact fees back, if this is approved.
Correct. If what is before you today is approved, you do not have the obligation to reimburse $800,000 in park impact fees. That is correct.
Counselor, does that answer
And
your
that's why I
question?
say this is calculus, and there's, you know, we do something here and
I
it
agree.
changes
And
here.
the reason I'm bringing this up is because there's a lot of moving parts. We're making a change to one of the parts. It's like changing one of the gears in a transmission. I want to make sure it doesn't impact the rest of the transmission. It's not a good analogy, but we've got a lot of other documents and agreements out there, and if we change this one, I just want to make sure it's not going to have unintended consequences on the other documents that are also applying to this development.
Well, I believe that the amendment is congruent. I've worked with staff extensively, specifically on this, and correct me if I'm wrong, obviously we have the members of the staff who would be able to tell us that, but it is congruent with everything that's required of us, and that's why I also recommended we not get rid of the institutional and PSP. That remains. So it will remain industrial and PSP, institutional and PSP along with the industrial and the IND1 and the LDC.
Great. So, and your comment regarding the $800,000 liability?
Well, currently we have $3.9 million invested into Track 17, and it's worth about $9 million. So I think the ROI is there for the city of Palm Coast.
I don't, you have to help me with that, what that means. In other words, how are you going to make up the $800,000 that's going to cost us?
Well, when we're able to, well, I don't know what timeline the $800,000 would have to be paid, and we can ask staff that perhaps. But if we have $3.9 million roughly invested into Track 17, and we can later sell this and market it because we do own it for roughly $8 to $9 million, which is about what it would be worth, then I would think that our return on investment for doing this is obviously there. But I would look to staff regarding the $800,000.
Yeah, and the
There's another
value you're
variable.
putting on there for future sale includes entitlements that exist or do not exist with it currently?
We would have to get the entitlements, but
You
here's
have to buy them, right?
Yes, we would. And here's the thing about that, Mayor. Regardless, even if it stays flex use, we'd have to get the entitlements anyways. So either way, and I look to the rest of this pink area because we're talking about commercial, industrial, all these other things, and working with the applicant. And I don't, this has nothing to do personally with the applicant. It doesn't matter who would be in front of me right now, I'd be making the same stance. With regards to the commercial, the industrial, all these other things that are on these tracks, we would always have to look for entitlements. There would always be an entitlement issue. So whether or not this stays flex use and we decide to put industrial on it, or whether or not we force this to be industrial, we still have to buy those entitlements.
And I guess I'm going to correct, just a second, to city manager for a minute. So these are some pretty hefty numbers as we are entering, we're midway through a strategic action planning process, which will eventually get us to a budget. Now, I realize that these dollars may not flow during this exact process, but I have to ask you, do you need to then reconfigure budget considerations as a result of a liability that we're imposing on ourselves with a decision like this?
Well, I definitely think it needs further evaluation, Mayor. I would not put staff in the position to try to equate that to an impact
Okay.
for tonight, at least.
All right.
I would also just state, Mayor, with regards to the actual impact itself, I mean, what we're doing is we're investing in our community. We are saying we are taking this specific tract that our economic development director that we are relying on has said, this is where we need to develop. This is it. This is a low-hanging fruit for the city of Palm Coast, so this is an investment.
Sure, but is this, and again, I appreciate that, and that's exactly what we would like to do, but is this a year from now, 3 years from now, or 5 years from now?
Whether it's flex use or industrial, it's going, it's still all.
But how long? It's money, time is money, and that's what I'm worried about. In other words, we can be on the hook with this piece of property for 5 or more years, in which time we will have a westward expansion that will offer us literally an unlimited amount of light industrial, heavy industrial, and every other type of commercial space we might have available. I'm just concerned at the magnitude of the number as we are in the middle of this budget cycle. The intent to show our desire to invest in economic development for the future, I concur with 100%. I'm just asking, is this that moment? Is this that hill you want to plant the flag on?
It is.
That's
I
one.
made that
Okay.
clear.
All right.
Can we give staff an opportunity to comment on the 800,000 issue? I know city manager said we shouldn't put you on the spot, but if you can,
Yeah,
help
thank
us.
you. I probably, see if I can make myself a little bit more clear. The 800,000 is owed from the last amendment for park impact fees. With this proposal that the applicant is making to add the additional residential units, that goes away.
Perfect. So then we would not have to pay the 800,000.
No.
Okay.
Counselor, anything else that you need to add at this time?
I'm doing work. I'm communicating with my client, trying to get some optics here. So forgive me. You know, again, we started off that this is an agreement, right? And that loss of obligation of the $800,000 and the entitlements that you have to buy in addition to the land, again, multiple variables, all focused on the goal. But right now, as I stand here today, I cannot agree to that proposal. That doesn't mean that tomorrow we're not willing to be drug into City Hall and start talking about this issue, and maybe it's an amendment that we come in next month or a minor modification. There's all kinds of opportunity.
Okay, well, we're not asking you to agree to our motion, so I guess we'll work through.
I can't agree to if that motion is approved, I don't have the authority to execute the amendment as you wish to change it.
Okay, understood. Gotcha. Very good. Okay. Anything else before I open it up for additional public comment? Are there?
Can we validate?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
We're speaking on behalf of Barbara here. Can staff attest to what, you know, do we need to do this? Is this the intent that Barbara has spoken? Are these the words that have come down like this, we should do this? Because that's what I'm looking for. It seems like you're suggesting that staff has made this recommendation. I'd just like to hear staff if they've made this recommendation.
I don't want to get, you know, too far into Barbara's work, but she is entertaining companies almost weekly, every other week. And there are several properties that we have permission to promote from the owner. We are the owner of this parcel. She promotes it heavily, and she has had, you know, many inquiries. We're going to be back there for another one on Thursday.
Excuse me, Jason?
Yes, sir.
Inquiries, but no takers.
Not yet. Not yet.
Kicking the tires.
Okay. If we don't have any questions, let me open it up, if I may, let me open it up for public comment. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on the motion that was made on the dais? Is that correct?
Yes, it's the motion to amend the Fifth Amendment. We are really in the weeds.
Yeah, amendception.
Robert McDonald, Palm Coast. $800,000. That's a lot of money. But I got a question. If the council votes against this project, do we take a hit on this $800,000? That's all my biggest concern is, if the council says no, or they want to change something and the applicant doesn't want to change it, and we go back and forth, my biggest concern is, where is this $800,000 sitting right now? Right now, I want to know where this 800 grand is. And if the council tonight votes no because they don't think it's right, or they got more questions than we have answers because the applicant is not here, his spokesman is. So my biggest concern is, where is that $800,000 right now? And if we walk away today, does that $800,000 go with it?
Do you want to restate your answer from before, Mr. Tyner?
Yeah, but I think, you know, the 800,000 is, when I said the last amendment, the applicant donated this much property. So let's call it, it's worth $800,000, right? So it doesn't come out of taxpayer money at all. What would happen is when the builder's building a house out there, they would be credited an impact fee. So until you reach that $800,000 of credit, then the city would then start collecting impact fees.
So you would delay revenue to the city, though?
Excuse me?
You would be delaying revenue to the city?
That's right.
Until the
To pay
800,
for that
right.
extra
So,
land.
so, Mr. McDonald, the answer to your question is that 800 grand is sitting before you. I mean, that's where it exists in this decision-making. And just clarify again, if this motion is voted in favor, then the city would be required to make up that 800 grand. If this motion does not, if this motion fails, the city would not have that obligation.
If this motion passes,
Yes,
every house would have to pay a park impact fee.
delaying that revenue to the city until the 800 is
We just
built.
collected.
Right,
And if this motion doesn't pass in the last amendment,
Right.
it's still active, then the applicant gets a credit of 800,000 for impact fee credits.
Can you restate that,
yeah,
Mr.
because
Tyner?
you threw me on that one too. Help me with it.
Let's-
Make it really simple.
Jason, make it simple.
Okay. Regardless, if you pass this evening, regardless of.
What, let's be specific, pass what?
Okay. If you.
We're talking about the motion on the floor at
Yes.
this moment.
Yes. If you pass the motion on the floor, you know, moving forward, every house pays a park impact fee. If you pass the staff recommendation, every house pays a park impact fee. If this fails completely, then there is still an $800,000 credit.
And what does that $800,000 credit get us?
Can I interject? The issue here is, hang on, the issue here is, forget about the motion to amend. We're just looking at the staff recommendation with regard to tract 17. What's the deal with the 800,000? Let's establish that first.
Sure, it's not related to track 17.
Okay.
It's related to the DRI.
So if we pass the amendment, which only has to do with tract 17, does that change what you just said?
No.
Okay.
Let's get back to 30,000 feet. If the amendment is passed,
Which one?
the one that is on,
The
second,
motion.
right, to amend it and change it, that is industrial. What I have said before, and I'll reiterate it today, my client cannot accept that change at this moment to the amended PUD. So if the motion passes, my client will not enter into the agreement at this moment with the city on the amendment. So that's what happens if this motion
I
passes.
understand that.
Okay.
That's
I just-
different than the 800,000.
The 800,000 is only wiped out in the event that the additional units are converted, because what happens, there's 800,000 in obligation, you converted those units, now there's more units, that obligation goes away, because
But
now
staff said, what you just said has nothing to do with track 17.
it has nothing to do with the conversion of, $800,000 has nothing to do with what's built on 17. That had to do with a transaction that happened 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, then I will ask the public for comment at this time. Yes, sir. And it's regarding the motion that we're discussing, please. Thank you.
Gene Dowd, Mayor. I'm totally confused, but if the client's attorney can't agree, why would we even vote anything tonight until city staff and the development staff get together and talk about it? I don't understand why we're in such a rush to vote this. It's been going on for an hour. If you're not going to vote for the amendment, vote the table. Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to comment on the motion we're discussing at this time? Yes, sir.
Mike Martin, Matanzas Woods. I agree that if this may be a problem that can cause an issue, again, I would agree to table this right now and let talks go forward with the developer. But on the other hand, the developer is coming in here and is asking you to give them something that will make them more money, which is more residential units. That's not an absolute right that we have to give it to them. They are asking for something. If they are asking for something in any kind of negotiation between two parties, if you ask for something, you are expected to also cede something, to give up something. You don't get 100% of what you want without giving something back.
Keep it to the motion. That's what we're public commenting
So
on
I'm talking
now.
about,
On the motion.
This motion serves the city well because it gives us the opportunity to bring in industrial-type companies that will provide well-paying jobs, which is everybody's been talking about that for the last few years. So I think that the motion itself serves the city well, and I think that's what you have to keep in mind when you vote on it, is not just what serves the developer, but what serves the city and its citizens. Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to comment on the motion at this time? Seeing no one come forward, I'll come back to the dais. So we have a motion and a second. Let's have a final round of discussion. Any comments regarding the motion?
Well, again, kicking the tires is one thing, but buying the car is another. How many years? How much money? We don't know. We're just looking for a crystal ball here. And I intend on voting against this motion.
Councilperson, you made your motion, so yeah.
I have nothing further, just with regards to all of this, I mean, all of it's flex use, we don't have a crystal ball for any of it, so again, this is just a commitment for our economic development team.
And let me, that's a good segue, if you will, for my comment. I wholeheartedly support the effort and the commitment towards economic development. I am, and city manager, I'll go on the record with this. So I've got one city council member who seems to be more current on plans for economic development for a specific area, certainly more so than I am. And I'm uncomfortable moving forward with this motion not having as much information or data, which was the reason for my questions about what is the timeline, who's really interested, and is this a build it and they will come, and how do the three legs of the stool work? I'm just not there yet. I'm not comfortable, but I don't disagree with the intent of the motion. I'm just not up to speed to be able to vote positively for it.
I agree with the motion. However, I do believe that we should table this for now with no further discussion this evening and no voting on the project.
Well, County Councilors, we have a motion and a second, so there's going to be a vote.
Oh, there will be a vote?
It has to be a
Unless you
vote.
withdraw your second. She could withdraw her second.
And you could do that. So if you would like to...
But if I can make a comment first before
go ahead.
anything's considered. I think that the idea that we have here is very, very valid, and I appreciate Ms. Councilwoman Pontieri's bringing forward all of the details that we have tonight. A lot have been flushed out about the $800,000 in credits, and then I'm not sure how much entitlements cost, what it would look like from that perspective, or anything like that. I do, however, share the same sentiment that I would also like to have access to the same type of information and just the same type of meeting that has occurred. And I understand that staff can't really reach out proactively because then they become conduits for communication between council members. So I know a lot of this stuff has to come out while we're up here on the council. I don't want it to create an environment of frustration, but I just feel ill-prepared for some of the things you said, and I'm not doubting them at all. I'm just saying a little bit of reassurance or reasoning from staff that we referenced would be my position, that I would like to have that opportunity before voting on something like this. And it also, you know, I'd want to make sure that we keep the best of light as far as the council's willingness to have developers come forward with ideas like this. And that's why I'm just a little hesitant to, you know, if we're all in consensus here that this probably is not going to move forward, then, you know, we probably shouldn't vote it down. We should just.
So to the councilman's point, and actually to the public speaker's point, so this conversation and this debate is exactly how seriously we take this and how important every detail is on these significant decisions. None of these decisions are taken lightly. I think you see very clearly this evening, this is how good governance works. You have a variety of opinions here on what the city looks like going forward, and we are up here debating that. So apologies for the length of time that it may take. Apologies to all if this process should be extended past the 20 years that it's been in process already, but we certainly are taking our time to consider it carefully with some very, very important elements. So I would ask Councilperson Hyder, based on your comments, do you have a desire to withdraw your second with the idea that we might table this discussion so that staff could perhaps bring us each individually up to date for a, as soon as possible, reconsideration of this?
I prefer not to withdraw my second. I would like to leave it as is.
And Mayor, if I may, and I appreciate not withdrawing the second, Councilwoman Hyder, if the consensus is that we need to look more carefully at this and discuss further with staff and perhaps try to work something out with the applicant, I'm willing to withdraw my motion and make another motion to table this decision so that it's not in front of us this evening.
Go ahead and withdraw.
So I withdraw the motion and make a motion to table this decision.
You need the second to withdraw.
I second.
So I have the motion and the second withdrawn. Now, Councilperson Pontieri, did you care to make a new motion?
I will make a motion to table this decision, the second reading of this ordinance, until we're better prepared up here to maybe make a decision on this specific amendment.
Now, Councilor, we've had public comment on this already. Do I have to have public comment again?
Not on the motion to table.
Not on the motion,
But you have
yes.
two options with the motion table, to a time specific or not to a time specific.
Not to a time specific because I don't know the
Require
schedules.
republication then, which is fine. It's just an expense. If the way the law works is that if we state this evening in the public that you're tabling it to a time specific, then we don't have to let the public know again because they're deemed to have knowledge of it.
Right.
I
City
don't
Manager,
care, but
when is our next business meeting? And I appreciate that, Counselor. When is our next business meeting?
So our next business meeting is June 20th. I would like to also reference on June 27th that our Economic Development Director will be here to provide a overview of the proposed Economic Development Incentive Program that would be in tandem to this conversation, I believe, and the meeting after that is not until, because July 4th is canceled as a business meeting. We're looking all the way into July 18th, being the business meeting after that workshop.
So that's a
Councilor,
little-
do you want to make it time specific to July the 18th?
I would like to make it time specific to July 18th.
So that's a motion. I don't think it needs to be restated. Is there a second for the motion?
A second.
So Councilperson Hyder has seconded the motion. Is there any further discussion by city council members?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
If we were to approve this and not table it, can't the applicant come back and get together with the city and work this out?
Approve what now?
yeah, which we've got two different things. The council member's amendment to the amendment or
Well, the amendment to the amendment is gone, right?
I just want to understand the context of your question.
My question is, just set this aside for a moment, all right, tabling this.
We're just giving ourselves some more time.
Or approval doesn't prevent the applicant and staff still working together on this.
Absolutely.
The reason I ask that question is because the applicant, without this, this motion to amend, has already indicated on the record that the applicant will sign that agreement. What the applicant does not have authority for this evening would be the Fifth Amendment as amended by the
Right, but
councilwoman.
nothing prevents the applicant and the city from discussing it further.
Between now and, absolutely not. Between now and the hard date, which is a part of the motion now, they absolutely will continue to negotiate
No,
this.
I mean if we just approve what we came here to approve, the second reading on this. Approve this development.
Well, that's not the motion that's on the table right
No,
now.
I know that's not, but my question is, if this motion is not passed, that's just been introduced, and we go back and approve this,
Yes.
nothing prevents the applicant and the city from dealing with this piece of property, right?
Well, yeah, I mean,
I think the only
we've already agreed
The
to.
only difference would be,
Yeah.
if I
Go ahead.
could, is that the applicant's not going to come back most likely and
Right.
apply for another amendment. The city would have to initiate.
I mean, I guess
that.
I just, again, have a problem. Yeah, it sounds like low-hanging fruit, but who's going to pick it and when? And again, your comments about moving westward and all of the growth that we're going to create, I don't see any reason personally for tying this up past tonight. I don't see what we gain from it. That's my feeling.
Okay. Final comments before we vote?
I have nothing further.
No comment.
Anyone else? Okay.
No, I just think that out of respect for our other council members, this may be best to be tabled. I was in the same school of thought originally as well, but I think that enough information has come forward that we can at least take it back to city staff to confer on the recommendations. I think that's fair for respect for council members.
Okay, and my last comment is, as city manager, you have control of the agenda. Is there no way to accelerate this time certain date of July 18th? It's a little bit long for me.
Mayor, there's a couple of options at your fingertips, is having a special
Yep.
business meeting, and that can work in tandem with a workshop of closing one out, opening another. June 27th is again the time that we had proposed, which is the next workshop roughly to bring the Economic Development Incentive Program.
Yeah, and it would be unfair to accelerate that because I'm sure that that's positioned. But if we were to pick ourselves a special workshop meeting,
Special business
a
meeting?
special business meeting in advance of this July 18th date, is that something that has to be part of this motion, or we could just
It
do?
would need to be part of this motion, in my opinion. Because we're doing it for a time certain, you want to have that time certain set at a time when we've got a business meeting.
So could we do a special business meeting after the workshop on June 27th?
Right, that's, you got to amend your motion now.
Okay, then I will withdraw the motion. Can we get a withdrawal of the second then?
Withdraw the motion. Yes.
And I will make a motion to table this for a special business meeting after the workshop on June 27th.
And Vice Mayor, that cuts down some of the timeline.
Why can't we do it next week?
Because we want to hear from
You
economic
have to hear from the
development.
economic development first.
So where's economic development? Did I miss something?
At
Where's,
that workshop.
They already have a plan, they already have a planned date in the calendar.
okay. We can't bring them here next week?
That's not up to us, that's city
why wait
manager.
longer than a
I
week?
mean, it's, yeah. I think it's agreeable.
So that's the motion.
Okay, so I have a motion. Do I have a
Okay.
second? I have a second. All right, give me a roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor Danko,
Yes.
Councilmember Hyder,
Yes.
Councilmember Clufus,
Aye.
Councilmember Pontieri,
Yes.
Mayor Alfin.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, now we now move on to ordinance G5, and Counselor, if you would read that into the record for us.
This is Seminole Woods Single Family Comprehensive Plan Amendment, application number 5060. It's an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, providing for the amendment of the City of Palm Coast 2035 Comprehensive Plan as previously amended pursuant to Section 163. It's Chapter 163 Florida Statutes, amending the future land use map for flume designation for 41.5 acres, more or less, of certain real property from Greenbelt to residential as described in more detail in the legal description, which is an exhibit to this ordinance, and adding a note to the future land use map to limit the subject property to a maximum of 180 dwelling units for the subject parcel, providing for conflicts, ratification of prior acts, codification, severability, and effective date. This is the second reading of a legislative matter. This is not quasi-judicial.
Thank you, Counselor. Are there some highlights that you would like to review with us from the last presentation?
I think Senior Planner Jose Papa will just highlight a few things on the,
Okay.
this one is for the comp plan amendment. And again, it's second read. No additions to this, and we're ready to take action, and the applicant is here as well.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. Jose Papa for the Community Development Department. As Mr. Tyner said, this is a future land use map amendment. There was a companion rezoning that goes along to this property. So currently, this future land use map amendment is essentially a proposal to redesignate about 41 acres from Greenbelt to residential. And we find that the residential designation is consistent with the surrounding land uses. You have residential use to the north, to the south. It is served by an arterial through the city, Seminole Woods Boulevard. We found that there are no environmental conditions that would be significantly impacted by this change. There are no special flood hazard areas within this property. And so we've recommended approval of the proposed future land use map amendment from Greenbelt to residential, along with a site-specific policy that will limit development of this property to at most 180 dwelling units.
And I believe the applicant is here too, Mayor.
I'm sorry, the applicant's here. Thanks, Ray.
Good evening, Jay Livingston, of Livingston and Sword, 391 Palm Coast Parkway, Southwest number 1. I have a PowerPoint that I prepared, but with the exception of some additional information that was discussed but not in the slides, I don't see any reason to go through it unless you have any specific questions.
So let's start with city council members. Specific questions on this presentation?
I have none.
The only thing that I want to clarify for the public, Mr. Livingston, is I know there was some concern about the wetlands that existed on this parcel. If you could just briefly explain to us what the process that the applicant goes through to look at whether or not these are high-quality wetlands and what the findings were, that would be helpful.
Do I have it? Yeah, so, and just another point of clarification based upon a comment that was made earlier and during the public comment phase, we're not removing green space. This is Greenbelt. It's a future land use map designation. It could be rezoned or zoned a variety of ways. PSP, PRS, PSP would be public purposes. It could be used for a variety of things. PRS would be preservation. Then it would be essentially green space. This property is currently Greenbelt and is zoned Estate 1, meaning it's already zoned for single family. The Greenbelt designation, as was explained before, there's a slide missing. No, we'll start here. So this is what the current property looks like, and then I threw this is a slide from 2005, just to kind of give you an idea. Back in 2005, before some of the canopy grew up, it gives you a little bit of a better idea. So in the front, you have a wetland area that's designated wetlands in terms of how its soils and the vegetation that's there, which is how wetlands are determined by both soil types and vegetation, as well as in some cases water being present. And then there's one through the middle, and then there's the cypress dome. I don't, if you all had the benefit of looking at the environmental study that was submitted, the cypress dome is in the back. That's an isolated cypress dome. That's the kind of true wetland on this site. The rest of the areas are depressional areas within the topography. And best example is here. So this is an example of just a theoretical example of how we could lay out the property. And as you can see, we have wetlands in the front, wetlands in the middle. Before anything is developed, we will do something much more significant than the preliminary environmental assessment that was done for the Flume Amendment. And they will determine if there are any high-quality wetlands. The initial assessment was that there were none. The Land Development Code has 3 types of wetlands, low, moderate, and optimal. Optimal are basically hands-off, and I'll let Mr. Tyner jump in if I say anything wrong, but I think the assumption at the time that the Greenbelt was put on this property when the comprehensive plan was first adopted, that we did have optimal wetlands on the site, and that was why the decision was made to put it into Greenbelt and Estate 1, because that would allow some minimal development and potential clustering. The reality is that we have to cross into the property through that wetland, and whether there's 42 lots or 180 lots or 177, which was in that hypothetical study, there's going to have to be fill brought in, there's going to be clearing, and there's going to have to be retention. Water flows downhill, so we put our ponds are sited either based upon where the fill is placed, so we fill in the property to make sure water flows towards our ponds, or we take advantage of the existing topography. And so I think sort of what you're asking is, in the process of delineating it, if those wetlands are in fact optimal, they can't be touched. That affects the development potential of the site regardless of what the zoning is. If the wetlands are moderate, well, that's going to affect the mitigation costs, and in most situations, depending on the quality and the UMAM score you get, you're going to have a lot of wetlands let alone because the cost of mitigation is too great. If the wetlands are, as we believe they are low quality, then they would be utilized for the stormwater retention, and they would be otherwise mitigated according to the St. John's requirements, which is what your code allows. That scenario, because of the location of the wetlands in front of the property and the need to bring in a road and also to fill in the rest of the property to provide for the lot under the thoroughly disrupted, both by activity on the site as well as the canal that was cut, which I wasn't able to get all of the historical aerials that I was able to get from the DOT, because I got about 10,000 images, and it's hard to find the actual property you're looking for when you have 10,000 images. But as far as I can tell, that canal has been there since at least 1952. So the disruption to whatever wetland system may or may not have been there at the time has been going on since then. But I think, going back to my original point, the real critical thing here is that we have a site that's already zoned for development. We're not changing green space or green belt to a developable land use. We have a green belt land use, which I can't show you the slide, but as I explained the last time, the policy for Greenbelt is to delineate basically the edge of your urban service area, where those transitional zones are. And I want to show you something on one of the graphics. And so this Greenbelt was established because of the belief of wetland systems that have been determined to not exist in terms of the quality and extent. The other appropriate place for Greenbelt is, again, in the edge of your urban service boundaries, and we're in the middle of the urban service boundary. Some of the terms that I threw out in the last meeting, which was the urban service boundary as well as, or the urban service area as well as urban sprawl, are definitions right out of the Community Land Planning Act, and we are in an area that already has existing infrastructure. It already has all the facilities there. It's surrounded by single family. The property to the north, which currently looks vacant, if we can get the graphic back up, you'll see is planned for a single family subdivision exactly like this one. So if the zoning if the land use and the current single family zoning is maintained, you're going to end up having a incompatible land use with the surrounding uses. And I think more importantly, you have a piece of property that was designated Greenbelt at the time based upon some assumptions that ended up not being true. And it really does, the state of the property as verified through the PISA and through this application really isn't consistent with that designation. But yeah, the process that we go through in any development is to delineate wetlands, determine their quality, and to the extent possible, minimize impacts. And in this case, because of the location of the wetlands, it is impossible to minimize impacts. There's one or two options. You could put the road through and try to minimize impacts, but you would have to then bring in a ton of fill to make that water flow somewhere else so you can provide your retention. And as you saw in that layout, the basic plan is to utilize some of these areas for that retention. So let me just show you. So as you can see to the north, we have there's a planned project that's already zoned single family 1, and it's already in the residential district on the flume, or the residential designation on the flume. And so if you kept it as is, you'd be sandwiched in between these existing single family. Would be an inconsistent land use. You're talking about equestrian estate lots, and you would still end up having similar impacts to the wetlands because of their locations in order to get the roadways in. And so just a few things. So again, this is your policy. And as I highlighted, or as I put in bold, in general, the Greenbelt flume is intended to prevent urban sprawl. Obviously, we are already surrounded by urban uses. We already have our existing infrastructure. So urban sprawl really, as it's defined by statute, really isn't an issue here. And it's just applied to many areas around the city's natural resources. That was the assumption that was made, and also to be a transition zone between more urbanized lands and undeveloped parts of agricultural lands. We're sandwiched in between either urbanized lands or planned urbanized lands that have the zoning for those uses. So it just doesn't fit this policy. And since the question was raised, and I think one of the articles that was written about the use of the term urban sprawl, these are the definitions. Urban sprawl means a development pattern characterized by low density, automobile-dependent development with either a single use or multiple uses that are not functionally related, requiring the extension of public facilities and services in an inefficient manner, and failing to provide a clear separation between urban and rural uses. Well, I would argue that maintaining the current designation and zoning is not creating a clear separation. It's creating this very inconsistent lot in the middle of everything else. And then just for the sake of, so you can see, so this is a really good picture that shows you the surrounding uses. And that yellow area to the north is where that planned subdivision is. You're wrapped around by urban uses. The facilities are already available along Seminole Woods. So you have everything in place to consider this, one, within your urban service area, and two, not to be a transitional zone, and three, this is not urban sprawl. If there's sprawl, then the sprawl is to the south, but that's existing uses. So we're infilling this and providing those rooftops there. And just as a reminder, as I explained to you the last time, this is part of a much more kind of broad effort that planning staff, my client, and myself have been through over the last couple of years, which was to try to solve another planning problem, which was to eliminate some incompatible multifamily in Matanzas. And in the process, we identified a parcel of land, which is this one. And the original proposal was to put multifamily on this site. Because of the surrounding single family, SFR 1 to the north, the projects to the north, on the opposite side of Seminole, everything to the south and also to the east, we thought that this would be a suitable place to essentially replace the multifamily that was in Matanzas that's essentially a donut hole surrounded by single family uses, and replace it here. We had a neighborhood meeting. The neighbors were not pleased with the idea of having multifamily there, so we agreed to not only set the future land use map to residential, but cap it at 200 units at the time, which would essentially eliminate the possibility of any future multifamily uses. Because even if we got single family zoning, if the future land use map was residential, it would allow for a future rezoning to multifamily. So we capped it at 200. At the first planning board hearing, there was concerns that number was too high, so we agreed to reduce that to 180, which essentially guarantees this site to be nothing but single family, which is consistent with the surrounding uses. And that's that collaborative process that we've been going through to solve another planning problem. So we're essentially fixing an incompatible land use in the north, fixing an incompatible land use to the south, and making sure that there's not any significant loss of needed housing units for the continual influx of people that are moving into Palm Coast without creating any significantly dense areas that would be inconsistent or that would create a burden on the neighbors. It'd be single family, there'd be buffered by the existing vegetation on the canal that won't be cleared because we don't own that land. And there's substantial separation, 130, I think, feet from the closest house from one side of the canal to the other, assuming that the layout ended up being something similar to what you see here. And then as I think you all realized from the last time around, the property's already platted. You can actually see where they cut some of the proposed roadways in, or at least the locations of them, back in the day before the canopy grew up. And as you can see, those lots that are shown there, that's actually, my client actually owns each individual lot of record per the plat. And it's not a meets and bounds description. They own every single one of those lots as originally platted by ITT. So I don't know, it's a lot of information, more than your question, but I think it's important related to how we got to this application, what we're trying to accomplish, and how it relates to the comp plan, since this is a flume amendment.
So, Counselor, I'm going to test your mettle here because you brought it up 3 times, so you opened the door pretty wide. What's the advantage to the city or to the neighborhood to adjusting the zoning from a state to the lot size that you're talking about?
Well, I think this advantage to the city is you're going to get needed housing units without creating an incompatible housing type, which was the multifamily proposal or a townhouse proposal. We went through a couple of different iterations.
Well, I'm sorry, slow down on that little piece there. So you've got a state there now, which means that you can have 1 house per acre. So are you suggesting that's incompatible with that neighborhood?
Yes, sir, especially since the zoning also allows basically agricultural type uses like horses, equestrian villages. Those are just, this is not something that somebody has to go to the city and say, can I have a horse on my lot? It's permitted as a matter of right under your zoning code. So once those 1 acre lots are put in, and putting in those 1 acre lots would result in clearing the site, would result in the installation of the transportation infrastructure, the retention that's necessary for that, for the rooftops that are going to be put in, you would end up having a equestrian village smack dab in the middle of SFR1 and SFR3, which is just not compatible, nor is it consistent with the intent of the comp plan.
And since I know that you go back more than a generation, can you give me any insight as to why these lots were originally platted under the current zoning that we're discussing today? I'm not clear on how that could happen.
Well, ITT made a lot of strategic decisions back in the day in terms of what they platted, what they didn't plat. It's hard to know for certain. The zoning under the county, when you all incorporated and became a city, was for, I think it was R3B, but it was for residential. It was consistent with the underlying plat. The ITT recorded the plat, which they did with many areas, because as you know, there's some reserve parcels that float around the city. Those were the ones that they basically pulled back on their
drop lots, yeah.
platting. And this one, they actually recorded the plat, and why they didn't install it, I haven't been able to determine that.
Okay.
But the plat was recorded and those lots are of record.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let me ask city council members, do you have specific questions about the presentation from the applicant? And the last one, because we did hear a little bit from the public at our last meeting. The canal represents a sizable buffer to the rear or the frontage of the properties that we're talking about in this parcel?
The best picture is probably the most recent one. So as you can see, so these black lines are actually the boundary lines. So my client owns all these lots.
Yeah.
Because the right-of-way was never built or dedicated to the city beyond the...
So that canal extends throughout the entire frontage of
Yes,
every
it
one of the
runs
neighboring
all-
properties?
yes,
So
sir.
you've got
And
all of that
clear all
buffer.
over to 95,
Okay,
yes, sir.
that answers
Yes,
my
sir.
question, thank you.
And all that vegetation along that canal is outside of my client's ownership and would not be disturbed.
Mr. Mayor, Council, just to remind everyone, this agenda item that we're about to take action on is not the rezoning. This is just a flume amendment. We've got
I'm sorry, yes, I see.
it's almost impossible not to get the conversations mixed up, because how can you do, it's chicken and the egg, but we've got to do the chicken first. So No offense to those folks that are here on chickens. So, but we are doing just the flume on this. And this is
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's why I mentioned the cap, because the concern was residential is a very broad category under the Flume Amendment, including allowing the highest density of multifamily. That cap was designed to ensure that this maintains a single-family use.
If there are no other questions at this time from City Council, I would open this item up to the public. Are there any members of the public that would like to address City Council on this ordinance at this time? Seeing nobody approach the podium, I will close public comment. And is there any additional discussion here? Then I would ask for...
I'll make a motion
I have a motion from the Vice Mayor. Could you state your motion for us, please?
to approve this.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second from Councilperson Hyder. Any additional discussion? Then I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor Danko?
Yes.
Councilmember Hyder?
Yes.
Councilmember Clufus?
Yes.
Councilmember Pontieri?
Yes.
Mayor Alphen?
Yes.
Passes 5-0.
We now move to, under ordinances, second read, G number 6. If you would read that in for us, Counselor, please.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. This is the rezoning application number 5061 for the Seminole Woods Single Family rezoning. It's an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, providing for the amendment of the official zoning map established in Section 2.06 of the City of Palm Coast Unified Land Development Code, amending the official zoning map for 41.57 acres, more or less, of certain real property generally located along Seminole Woods Boulevard, and more particularly described in the attached Exhibit A, from suburban estate, EST1 zoning district, to single-family 1, or SFR1 zoning district, providing for conflicts, severability, and providing for an effective date. Mayor, the council, this is a quasi-judicial, so if there have been any ex parte communications since the last reading of this, the first reading of this, those need to be disclosed at this time.
Vice Mayor?
I'm sorry.
Any quasi,
No,
any ex parte?
I did with the applicant, and it will not affect my decision-making today.
Ex parte? I've had none. Counselor? Okay.
Mayor, this is the companion of the last item. This is the rezoning. It actually rezones it from EST1 to SFR1, Single Family 1. We have nothing further to add to the presentation. Again, the applicant's here for questions as well.
Any questions to staff? Then I would open up the item to the public. If anybody would like to comment at this time, please come forward. Seeing no one come forward, I'll close public comment, and I would ask for a motion.
I'll make the motion.
The Vice Mayor has made a motion to approve the ordinance as read. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I have a second from Councilperson Pontieri. Any additional discussion? So go ahead and call us.
Vice Mayor Danko?
Yes.
Councilmember Hyder?
Yes.
Councilmember Clufus?
Yes.
Councilmember Pontieri?
Yes.
Mayor Alphen?
Yes.
It passes 5-0.
We now move to item number G7, ordinance of second read. Counselor, if you would.
Sure, this is a rezoning application number 5062 for the Longfellow subdivision rezoning. Ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, providing for the amendment of the official zoning map as established in Section 2.06 of the City of Palm Coast Unified Land Development Code, amending the official zoning map for 26.31 acres, more or less, of certain real property generally located between Lennon Drive and Longfellow Drive, and more particularly described in the attached Exhibit A, from multifamily residential 1, MFR1, zoning district, to single-family 1, SFR1, zoning district, providing for conflicts, severability, and providing for an effective date. Also, this is quasi-judicial, so the same warning. If there's been any ex parte communications since the first reading, those need to be disclosed at this time.
None for me.
No.
No question.
No, we have no ex parte.
Good, thank you.
Mayor, this is also a second read. This is one of those neighborhoods that is currently zoned multifamily in our Matanzas neighborhood, and us working with the applicant to, I guess, you know, what some people call down zone. So this action is to go for a multifamily.
Mr. Tyner,
one.
if you would, just
Yep.
let me catch you right there.
Yep.
So be very clear with the media present, the opportunity and the advantage of down zoning.
Well, let me tell you, multifamily within this neighborhood, if you can look at the aerial picture, right? It has single-family homes in the backyards of where a multifamily project would be. In a planning sense, inconsistent, okay? There are areas, I do want to stress, because there are appropriate areas to site multifamily. This is not one of them. Okay. So we have worked with the applicant to change the zoning from multifamily to single-family, such as the surrounding area.
And worked with the public, I assume, at your public hearings as well.
That's right. This had a a neighborhood meeting as well.
As you had said at your last presentation. Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank you. Questions by city council members?
No, I'm glad we're downzoning this area. It seems to be more compatible with the surrounding areas, so I think this is a positive thing.
No questions.
No questions. I think the downzoning should be the headline, that's for sure.
So I would, well, I mean, I just want to emphasize the fact that staff is not only working with the developer, but staff and the applicant have reached out to the public and had a collaborative meeting and discussion to come up with this result, which is a good result. So I'm certainly, I for one am pleased to hear that. So I would open up this item for public comment. Are there any members of the public? I'm sorry, I didn't give the applicant a chance to address it.
If you don't have any questions for me, I don't have anything to add. I would like to say I don't want to waste any more of your time because you already have, I think you have a lot left on your agenda, but this is exciting because Mr. Tyner and I both went through one of the early neighborhood meetings when you first adopted that process on another parcel pretty close by. We were trying to get a condo project approved, and then the public came out and they were rightfully aggressive in not wanting an apartment built in their backyard, looking down into their pool decks or their living rooms. And it's been a slow process that we've gone through, but I think we'll all be pleased with the end result. So it's kind of exciting to kind of reach this because we've been working on this now for almost 2 years. Some of that, maybe even a little more because of COVID, certain things got slowed down, but this has been a long process that it's nice to finally bring it to the finish.
And I agree. You know, one of the themes through the meeting this evening and the prior meeting where these initial presentations were made is as we are chipping away at the original building blocks or plan of ITT that was laid out and the inventory of available building lots is diminishing, it is good to know that we are looking at what is available very carefully and working with both the residents and the developers and city staff to end up with this kind of a solution. So I appreciate your comment.
And not necessarily relevant to the application, but in light of, I did not realize today was the 25th anniversary of the fires, because I was here that summer when the fires were burning, and you know, two areas that were affected, Matanzas and Seminole, substantially are now, you know, vibrant communities, and that was a, I spent July 4th standing on my parents' roof with a hose because there were cinders falling out of the sky, so I remember that summer, you know, with, not fondly, but it's a memory we'll all have, that those of us that were here.
Thank you, Counselor. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this ordinance at this time? Seeing no one come forward, is there any final discussion, questions, comment? Then I would ask for a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Councilperson Pontieri has made a motion to accept.
Approve, I apologize, to approve, yes.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
And Vice Mayor Danko has made a motion to second. Any additional discussion?
No.
Go ahead and call.
Vice Mayor Danko?
Yes.
Councilmember Hyder?
Yes.
Councilmember Clufus?
Yes.
Councilmember Pontieri?
Yes.
Mayor Alfin?
Yes.
The motion passes 5-0.
Very good. We now move to item H, and are we on number 9 now? Or 8?
We are 8.
Number 8. If you would read number 8 in for us, please.
It's a resolution. It's a resolution
Yes.
titled Headworks and Aeration Basin Improvements. It's a resolution of the City Council, City of Palm Coast, Florida, approving the terms and conditions of a construction contract with Florida Design Contractors, Inc., along with a 10% project contingency for the WWTF1 Phase 2 Headworks and Aeration Basin Improvements Project, authorizing the city manager or designee to execute the contract, providing for severability, conflicts, providing for implementing actions, and an effective date.
Please proceed.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Description read it off pretty accurately. Wastewater Treatment Facility number 1, Headworks Bypass Aeration Improvements. Okay, Headworks Bypass and Aeration Improvements, scheduled capital improvement project for award of a construction contract with project contingency, which is approximately, was it not up on the screen? Sorry about that. Oh, my apologies. It was in my own world there for a second. Okay, thank you. All right. scheduled capital improvement project for award of a construction contract with the project contingency. It was approximately $5.2 million. And this is a location map of wastewater treatment facility number 1. Probably most of you are aware of that location. It's 26 Utility Drive, just east of Old Kings Road. And this is a little bit of a close-up of the facility and the components of the project that'll be worked on, which includes the oxidation ditches and the headworks itself. So the oxidation ditches will each receive 4 floating jet aerators, and the headworks will have a constructed piping system with meters, valves, and so forth, so it can be bypassed to be worked on. So we'll just talk real quickly about the wastewater treatment facility number 1. It's an activated sludge domestic wastewater facility permitted to treat up to 6.83 million gallons per day. The headworks itself provides the first stage of treatment, receives raw sewage from the city's wastewater collection system being pumped to the wastewater treatment facility. The headworks consist of mechanical bar screens, influent pump station, grit removal, and biofilter. Its primary function is to remove debris, sand, and odor. The oxidation ditches, on the other hand, there are 3 existing. You can see on that picture, those oval looking concrete structures there are actually referred to those as ditches, but they're oxidation ditches. Okay, so that's a secondary treatment. Really what that's used for is aerating the raw sewage. It promotes a biological process. Its primary function is to convert the ammonia in the sewage to a nitrogen. Okay. The oxidation ditches are currently equipped with brush aerators, which we'll get into that in a little more detail here in a bit. Okay, headworks coating and repairs. Headworks concrete structure require a protective coating to be maintained to prevent corrosion from hydrogen sulfide gases and abrasion. And so you can imagine all the raw sewage coming in and the grit and everything, even though there's pre-screening and so forth, it's got to, you've got to really protect those concrete structures with a coating. And that tends to just, over time, it wears off, just like paint on a car or anything else. Okay. The sewage flow from wastewater treatment facility 1 cannot be shut down. Obviously, there's continuous flow into the plant, so we can't just, shut it off for a period of a couple months and magically assume it's going to go somewhere. So we have to build this bypass system. Okay, so therefore, the headworks has to be bypassed through the oxidation ditches directly, so the headwork can be taken offline to inspect, clean, recoat, and address needed repairs to the concrete. The new bypass piping system will allow future repairs to the headworks to be possible. So right now, we have really no way to service the headworks because it's in constant active use. So what this will allow to be done is we can temporarily go into the oxidation ditches, which they'll clean those out afterwards because you're not getting your grit removal and the solids and a lot of things that come through in the raw sewage. They'll clean those ditches out later. But for the period of time that it's under construction, allows us to really go in there, clean that system up, inspect it thoroughly. There's a lot of things about the structure we don't really know. There could be corroded concrete and so forth, that this allows the opportunity to address that and repair that.
So this is very much a permanent bypass system that we're installing. It's very much a permanent system that we're installing here, right? This isn't a temporary bypass system?
Well, it's permanent, but it's just a temporarily bypass. Correct.
Understood, yes. But it's a permanent solution. Understood, got it.
Exactly. So this is something that's actually a tremendous benefit for the facility. The aeration equipment for the oxidation ditches. The ditches are currently equipped with brush aerators, which have become prone to mechanical breakdown and difficult to service. The new jet aerators will provide higher efficiency, lower cost in operation, and ease of maintenance. Here is a close-up of, or kind of a schematic of how we're configuring the jet aerators in the oxidation ditches. Now, just to be clear, we're not removing the brush aerators. We're going to leave those in as backup, but the intermittent use of those will obviously significantly reduce the amount of wear and need to repair those and the energy consumption and so forth. So they'll just be, we won't lose that as a capital value. You can, let me get to this next one. Okay, so on your left hand, or my left hand, that would be the existing brush aerators. That's a close-up of that. And you can see the proposed floating jet aerator is completely different. They're cabled off, they float, they use a much more mechanically simple system just to entrain that air and keep that oxidized. All right, and you can kind of see how the mechanical brushes tend to clog up and those forks break off and so forth. Okay, so that's pretty much the project in whole. I'll take any questions.
Quick question. This plant stays at this site or this location in depth forever? It's not planned to move anywhere else, right?
Correct.
So it will always be here off of Utility Drive, despite the fact that other parts, related parts of the city utility department will move away from there.
That is correct.
But
Yeah,
you stay put.
Yes,
Okay.
that is permanently located.
And is it a fair assumption to make that the cost of doing this is reflected in some way in the utility fees study that was done?
Yes, it would be, because these are capital dollars,
Right.
you know, for it, so.
Sure.
Of course, it's my understanding there's a separation between the capital funding and
Right.
then the general funds that come in to operate the system, which
Yeah.
shows up
So
in
you have a
utility bills, right?
perpetual operating system that obviously can never be shut down. You're building a bypass, so you have the opportunity to go in to upgrade it and maintain it properly, so we don't have a catastrophic failure, which we create a health hazard in the community.
That is correct.
Okay. Questions from city council members?
You asked the question I was going to
yeah.
ask. Thank you.
I just have one question from a financial standpoint for the city manager. There's a really large contingency for this of $472,000. If the contingency has to be used, is there some type of approval that has to come back before city council? Or does staff pretty much have carte blanche authority to approve any use of the contingency that we approve today?
So the contingency is at the fingertips of staff, correct? The extensive use of contingency, meaning going beyond it, it depends on what that looks like from a magnitude of dollars. At a approval beyond my authority, that would have to come back to city council.
So what would that figure be?
Well, I'll look to Elena, but my approval authority based on what city council set as a policy is 49999.
So is that
50,000 basically, under 50,000.
Is that above the 472,000, or is that within the 472,000?
That's above.
Above, okay, thank you.
The other thing I'd like to add is that, you know, when you have a contingency, which is fairly standard in construction contracts, it's not a carte blanche. I don't want it to sound to the public like they can go out and buy pools for an entire neighborhood.
Right.
It's specifically considered to be an unforeseen cost associated with the construction of this project.
And I understand that, thank you, Counselor.
That wasn't for you, that was just for the public.
Right, and I'm glad you clarified that. I guess with such a large contingency, we are trying to be very mindful of the budget. $472,000 is a lot of money, so.
The other issue is, so with this particular process, you can't dive in there and see what damage exists, you know, below the I guess we'll call it the water line.
Certainly, no, I mean, the contract does say
so-
that
You could.
Yeah.
You just wouldn't want to. I was going to say the same thing.
So, yeah.
says that they've gone out and they've looked at the site, and,
Yeah.
you know, the contract price is based on their physical
Sure,
observation, so I can appreciate that.
but you know how that goes. Once you dig down, you
course.
never know what you're going to find at the bottom. Okay, all right. If there are no other specific technical questions, I appreciate the presentation, by the way. I was going to say you boiled it down, but you homogenized it well for us, so I appreciate that. I will open this item up to the public if there are any questions from the public at this time. Once again, I would reinforce the idea when the public wants to know, are we paying attention to growth and to the continuing high bar of service that we offer to the community? This doesn't seem like it, but trust me, this is right in the heart of what you need to have happen at your house every single day, and God forbid it doesn't happen for a couple hours, you will be up here in front of us and be very unhappy. So it's critically important for the future. I can't say it any more delicately than that. So if there is no public comment, I'll come back to the dais. Any final discussion? I would ask for a motion. I have a motion from the Vice Mayor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second from Councilperson Pontieri. Any further discussion? So all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Does the clerk have the count?
The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. We now move on to the second resolution, number 9, under H. Counselor?
Yes, this is a resolution regarding a Department of Transportation grant. It's a resolution of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, approving the submission of a grant application for multi-city charging and fueling infrastructure, authorizing city manager or designee to execute said agreement, providing for severability conflicts, for implementing action, and providing for an effective date.
You may proceed.
Okay. Good evening, Carl Cody, Director of Stormwater Engineering Department. I have here who will be doing the presentation today is Maeven Rogers. She's our Chief Sustainability and Resiliency Officer. She has been on board for a few months now and has been moving forward on multiple initiatives throughout that will benefit a lot of our capital projects here. Just before we get started on the presentation, I just wanted to touch upon some of the history and kind of where we're headed and some of the things that she is tasked with that do benefit some of the strategic action plan that council has, as well as funding assistance for some of our current capital projects. As you know, the city has always been had a green initiative. We can tie that back to sustainability, resiliency. Various words and terms are out there that kind of relate to the same sort of, I guess, area of what our importance is as a city. Council has seen that vision. We tried to implement that vision over those years. We do have an ordinance in place for green, incentivizing green building. We have implemented that with design criteria for some of our city facilities and structures, pursuing LEED certification like we have done here at the City Hall, like we've done with our Southern Recreation Center, Community Center. In some of our Southern Recreation Centers, some of the benefits that you'll see as part of this presentation that's here before you tonight is to provide some funding assistance for some of those requirements to be a sustainable, LEED certified facility. Our Southern Rec Center has solar on it. That's something that's not here before you tonight, but we can touch upon at the end slightly is, some potential grant funding that we may get some reimbursement for providing solar on our facility. This one here is going to have some direct correlation to help offset some of the costs of providing EV at that facility. That's a requirement for our LEED certification. So, I know, council's also tasked staff with looking at electrifying our fleet. So, EV is something that's been out there and ongoing for many years per council's direction for staff to look at. We do have an EV station here at City Hall. I know our light team will be coming before council to present some options with, how to charge and implement a program or options, or just provide you with that information as to, what's been looked at. So that's coming in the future, but what you have here before you is Maeven's been tasked with, pursuing grants, a lot of grants related to resiliency, sustainability. How can we tie those into our programs, our strategic action plan, and help benefit from those funding opportunities that are out there? And I'm going to let her run with it from there and just have you give you the facts and information on the potential grant that we'd like to apply for.
Good evening, Council. Considering this is my first time up here talking to you all this evening, I'd like to extend an immense amount of gratitude for this opportunity. It has been such a pleasure serving the City of Palm Coast residents and this beautiful region. I'm a Central Florida girl, and now I'm a Northeast Florida girl, and so I'm sold, so I absolutely love it. So I just want to start out with my thank yous. And also, I would be remiss not to thank Carl Cody and also the employees at City of Palm Coast. They've really made this transition so easy and very helpful. So I thank all of them for that. Great. And so since I started, one thing I wanted to make sure is that I watched every single city council, whether I was in attendance or at my desk. I made sure to listen and understand what your goals were. And something that kind of kept repeating itself was EV charging, grants, and how do we get there. So today I'm very excited to present this opportunity to you that I think really complements the goals of this council and can really complement our residents as well and provide some resources. So this grant is a Department of Transportation Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Discretionary Grant Program. This grant pays for multiple items. It can pay from anything from land acquisition to the paint that we need to maybe make the EVSE ready spots, to signage, to hydrogen fuel, which we won't be looking into today. But, you know, and education, lighting. And the grant has a mandatory 5-year maintenance fee, so any EV chargers that will be going under the grant, which we're going to talk about a little bit on what that grant's going to look like if we are able to apply, would have a 5-year maintenance fee, so that's a 5-year warranty. There is an 80-20 match, and the minimum is $500,000, and the maximum is $15 million.
You know, one thing just to highlight there, so the grant provides 80% funding for the infrastructure or the EV itself, which is a very high amount for the funding for the city only to be required to provide a 20% match. And that 20% match will have some potential flexibility on how we provide that match, but that the payback time, if you know we provide these to the public and we do implement a charge for use of those, the payback's going to be very short. And you know that's something we'd come back to you in the future and present to you once we're awarded and we know how much dollars we're awarded and what type of program we're moving forward with. We can put together that cost, you know, life cycle, you know, analysis for you at that time. But I just wanted to touch upon that 80-20 is, you know, is not typical. Lots of times you see 50-50 with our grants, you know, and 80-20 is a nice match.
Yeah, 50-50 is pretty much the best I've heard of as I've sat up here.
Yes, yes. You can go ahead and change the slide. So I just wanted to give a brief landscape of what our EV charging network looks like right now. So roughly over the whole county, there's 25 chargers. And if you look at what the general EV adoption rate is across the nation, I did a general estimate. I took that 3.38% and just made it 3% and times it by 120,000 of our population. And that means roughly 3,600 residents have EVs today with only 25 available chargers. So you can see from these numbers, we are in an EV desert, as we like to call it. There's a couple different items with this as well. When we talk about resiliency measures and evacuation routes and making sure our residents have the availability to make sure that their cars are charged at all times, this can, you know, present a problem. It can also present a problem with our tourists. If you're stopping by the I-95 or you're on the A1A and you have no availability to charge your car and there's an emergency situation, this would give residents more of an availability and our tourism more of an availability to come into Palm Coast, explore, charge as they wait, or if there is an emergency evacuation, they have that time to do so. So a little bit about the grant. So considering this is a federal Department of Transportation grant, we are stronger together. And I know from Mayor Alfin's State of the City address, you know, really looking to our city partners, our regional partners on how we can really make an expansive network. And when we talk about EV charging, it really is about creating a network for our residents. We know our residents go to Flagler Beach. We know our residents are at the city of Bunnell as well. And so there are quite a few cities that are interested in this. The city of Bunnell and the city of Flagler Beach are interested in adding EV infrastructure, as well as Flagler County Public Schools. Flagler County has agreed to provide a letter of support for this grant. We also, today, I've heard a lot about jobs. So the wonderful thing about this grant is it does offer 5% in education. And what we've done is we're partnering with Daytona State College, if awarded, to do workforce development. Right now, across the nation, we have a shortage of electricians. Bringing in new jobs for EV infrastructure is new jobs, and it does create more employment opportunities. And Daytona State has a wonderful electrician program that's part of the union that gives really good paying jobs for maybe non-traditional students that wouldn't want to go to a 4-year university. Just a little bit about what we were thinking about applying for is we are looking at these different locations, and I have worked alongside the light team. They've been working the last year on identifying the best locations for EV chargers. We have identified 3 locations based on, you know, parking spaces and things of that nature. Our biggest one would be at the Southern Rec facility because we have quite a robust parking network there, and then we can provide what we call a multimodal hub. So the Department of Transportation is interested in multiple forms of transit, and they want to support that as part of this grant. So most of our EV charging would go at Southern Rec, which seems to make a lot of sense because if you think about the clientele that will visit Southern Rec, we're talking about tennis, we're talking about pickleball, we're talking about community center, enjoying dinner, drinks, community garden, hanging out for a while right beside the park, you know, right beside our trailheads. This area seemed to make the most sense when we talk about robust charging. So what we were looking at is actually creating a multimodal hub at our Southern Rec facility, given all the sustainability principles that are already going into our Southern Rec facility. We have, you know, when it comes to sustainability, there's multiple components there, and I can't wait till it gets built so we can highlight it, but considering the local food, the solar, that we're going to be, you know, basically shading out from extreme heat for our residents so they can play pickleball throughout the summer, and providing this multimodal hub at Southern Rec would really highlight the city's sustainability initiatives. So we were looking at that, and then we have Holland Park with 1 DC fast charger and 2 level 2s, and then adding some to City Hall as well, and that's 1 DC fast charger and 2 level 2s. We weren't thinking about putting them right out in front of the parking lot here, but more to the side, and then also having that availability of when we do make the transition, or when we decide to make the transition to an electric vehicle, we have the available infrastructure here on site to be able to support that.
You know, just to touch upon the Southern Rec Center, you know, being along the trailhead and having that dog park there, you know, there's a lot of use in having that multimodal. You know, electric bikes are becoming very popular, and that component in there, you know, is beneficial as another alternative for our residents.
So I just want to highlight where it would go at Southern Rec, considering that would be the bigger part of the project, and it would be right up front. So it wouldn't take, you know, it wouldn't be right up against the building. It would be towards the side, so that way, you know, the residents can park and hang out.
Right, kind of in between the trailhead and the Southern Rec Center, so it could serve both facilities and users of both locations.
Questions?
So part of just to summarize, you know, that collaboration, you know, the big piece of that is, you know, we obviously don't want to provide EVs right around the corner from where Flagler Beach or Bunnell or others, the school, you know, may be providing them. So it was really, you know, Maeven worked really hard having that coordination efforts with all those other entities, identifying a county-wide layout of where best place to put those EVs. So it's really a county-wide plan, bringing those partners on board so we have one comprehensive plan, and then each entity will be implementing, you know, those EVs in their area.
Since we have a single council member that has I shouldn't say that, I don't know that for sure, but I know of one that has a EV chargeable vehicle. I'll start with you with questions.
Yeah, no questions, but I think it does put an emphasis on the state really trying to push electrification through an 80-20 split. I mean, that's pretty wild. And I don't think it's going to be, you know, these charging infrastructures, having them at destinations like this is great because those are people who are coming from other destinations to go to the tennis center to watch, you know, whatever tennis event is going on or going to the park. A lot of everybody who charges, you know, who lives in Palm Coast generally has some type of charging infrastructure at their home. But always having more infrastructure seems like it's a win-win, and it seems like the state is very clearly putting an emphasis on this by offering an 80-20 split.
So based on your experience, if these chargers did exist, then our location would show up on the Tesla map in your car?
I don't think it would show up on the Tesla map, but the CCS maps for sure. These would be more like general application chargers, I would imagine.
So, I mean, you have a screen that shows you where you can get your next charge. Would we appear on that? Is that an advertising component for us?
It can, yeah, absolutely. By default, it only shows the level 3 stuff, but you could turn on level 2, and these would most certainly show up for sure. Yeah.
Councilperson Hyder, questions?
No questions.
I assume there'll be credit card machines on these things? They're not free, right?
No, they won't be free, and we can discuss that at a later date. We can come up with some different models. We will have purchasing power, so we will have options.
Okay, so they'll give us 80, we pay 20. Is that correct? You said an 80-20
But
on the...
just to help, the 20 can be in a variety of different
Right.
forms. It's not, you know, it can be land, I forget the list, but there's a engineering, there could be a bunch of different ways to incorporate it into it to make up your 20.
But we should be able to recoup our money then? We'll get a slice of that electric or some sort of fee or tax or something, I don't know what.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, okay. And my only concern is, are we interfering with private enterprise? Because this sounds like a business. I mean, you don't have gas pumps at these places for people with gasoline cars, right?
Well,
We put electric chargers
Well,
there.
those two things are, because you don't have gas lines to these places. Installing electric chargers is much more simple than installing
Right.
gasoline infrastructure.
But right now, we presently have electric vehicles. They drive on our roads. They don't pay any type of user fee,
Yeah.
like folks who have
Right.
automobiles do.
And I think they should, in my opinion.
I think they should too, and I brought this up a couple
Well,
of weeks ago.
this answers your question. This is one step towards how do you start to collect off of those
Right,
folks.
but I just worry
Locally.
about government getting into the free enterprise area.
and I don't think we'll be exploring that option. We won't be exploring a free enterprise area, and I will say that these private companies are excited about this opportunity.
What private companies?
The various charging companies. So it's not hurting, it's actually bolstering jobs and the private, but also benefiting.
I don't see that.
Vice
I
Mayor,
see us interfering
well,
with free enterprise.
Vice Mayor, the other point to this is these locations are on our own city property.
Right.
Just it's different than free enterprise choosing perhaps even better locations that they can invest in
Right,
and do all of that.
That I would see is what free enterprise does.
Mm-hmm.
They say this is a great spot to put these chargers, and we're gonna make a profit, and it's gonna be convenient for
Except
people.
free enterprise that goes off of our property doesn't have to give us anything.
Well, yeah, they would pay a tax. just
You'd be paying a
fee.
a utility fee, which would be much smaller than this component. But okay, I mean, your
But I mean,
point,
I
your
guess
point
I
is
don't-
correct.
I don't
yeah.
want to see us get into a situation where somebody comes in a business and they want to open up a charging station or for whatever.
Right.
And they're going to charge X number of dollars. But hey, if we go use the city's chargers, well, it's half the price. I don't want to see us undercutting free enterprise.
Good point. So
and that's my concern.
my only comment, but it's a good concern. So at $500,000, which I assume is what your target is here, and this opportunity has a limited timeline of availability to us. We're taking a very small bite out of the future. Now, I also, and I have to say this, okay, I'm positive about your presentation. I think you've grossly overstated the number of electric vehicles based on your arithmetic. I don't think our demographics in this area support that calculation in any way, shape, or form.
I
that's
strongly disagree with that.
okay. But that's unimportant because it will grow. There's no question about it, especially if we bring younger folks here. But at the $500,000 mark, we're talking about 3 stations, or how many locations?
3 locations, 11 stations.
Yeah. Okay.
And it would probably be a little more than $500,000, but we're still working on those
So
numbers.
the only way I would twist this around is, are we leading the way to invite private enterprise to come in and get ahead of us?
Private enterprise will come in when private enterprise sees a way to make a profit.
Oh, but that's the problem. And
But
that's why
so,
the state
but
has to
we're,
back
but
it.
we're making money now, so we have an advantage over them.
I just don't think we
Yeah.
should compete with free enterprise.
Okay.
You know, I mean, we're not that type of government, or we shouldn't be. And my feeling is let the marketplace.
So is that a question for the state that's offering the grant?
Huh?
Is that a question for the federal government who's offering the grant?
Well, hey, this federal government, I got a lot of questions.
Okay.
Yeah, all right, I mean, seriously. And I just don't see us in being a business like that. You know, and again, I fear that
but
we
you-
will undercut
Yeah,
free enterprise.
but you did want to find a way to charge folks for using electric vehicles.
Well, yeah, And there's other ways to do it. I mean, because
Which-
they can
which-
charge their
which-
electric
which are?
vehicle- They can charge their electric vehicles at home.
Not the ones that are
and we don't
coming,
know
not the ones that are coming through the community visiting.
until somebody sets up a charge station that,
Right.
you know, I mean,
Okay.
free
I'm just trying to get you to where you want to be, where we should tax folks that are not
happen-
buying gas.
You know, everyone's like, all these electric vehicles, this is great, you know, and so on and so forth. What about all those gas stations? This may be a way for them to supplement their income. We're gonna cut into that? That's my concern.
Okay. I mean, you're asking a question, I don't think it has an answer.
Well, you know, it's called free enterprise. That's
Yeah.
the answer.
Well, I mean, aren't we also part of the free enterprise system? Just asking. Okay.
We should be competing like this.
Yeah.
That's my concern.
Okay.
And again, if we were competing like this, I need assurances that if it, and I don't even know how much it costs to charge a car for an hour, but let's say it costs $15 or $10 or whatever. I want to make sure we're not doing it for $5 and undercutting a business. There has to be a guarantee that we're going to have market pricing, fair market pricing. Not go to the city of Palm Coast.
Okay,
'cause it's gonna
yeah,
cost
good
us
point. Is that something you can confirm to us, that we would not be preventing free enterprise from, building the best business model? Because I think the vice mayor makes a valid point.
There's no restrictions in the grant that limit what we can charge for.
So it would be up
use
to
of
city council.
So it would have to come back to us, every year or every 6 months.
Whatever it is, and you could
Or
make
we'd have
sure,
to appoint staff to keep us.
you could
current
make sure
on-
that you're not stealing from private
Right,
enterprise.
right.
Okay.
It would be, it's like, it's not our job.
I would just think that it's the lack of competition that exists today. So I know this is coming from the federal government, but when in 2019 or 2020, Ron DeSantis gave like $10 million to ChargePoint to come in and put infrastructure along the highways. The problem right now isn't really it's the non-existence of a charging network. And there's very little incentive for somebody to come around and just put like 1 or 2 or 3 in these locations. And it's just an underserved priority right now.
Is it
Yeah, I'm hoping this
underserved
would- I'm
because it's
hoping
not
this
in
would-
demand? I mean, that's my question.
What is it?
Is there a demand for this? Because it seems to me that if this were a money-making enterprise, to Vice Mayor's point, why wouldn't we just allow private companies to come in and do this? And to that, why not allow a private company? Well, I guess my question is, and I listened to the county meeting on this issue yesterday, and according to what came out during that meeting, it's going to cost us $316 per month for power for each of the level 2 chargers. And I believe, Maeven, that came from you yesterday. So are we going to make enough money to where we're not losing taxpayer dollars on this? So in other words, are we going to make at least $316 a month from each charging station based on what we're charging the public? And not only based on what we're charging them, but is there a demand? Because that's why people get into business, is supply and demand. So is there a demand for these charging stations? Do we have data on that? And then can we cover our bottom line and make sure that there is actually an ROI to this?
So the light team did do a study, and level 2, you can make roughly $2,000 in revenue a year from those. We can charge, so if we pay, so for instance, so right now we're not charging. But for instance, let's say, we're paying 12 cents a kilowatt hour, but we charge our residents 33 cents a kilowatt hour. We're always going to cover our energy costs. We will definitely make sure of that. The ROI will be there. It's just depending on the deals and the variability. So there's a lot of, the different contracts that are going to come up could provide multiple different options for you all to choose from. So we will get a return on investment. They will pay for themselves. How high that return on investment is to be determined.
Well, so, and forgive me, if it costs $316 per month for the electricity on a level 2 charger, and the light team is going to tell us that we can make $2,000 a year per charger, that's
after electricity. That's in revenue. So that's after all the costs.
So that's the net.
The net.
Okay, and based on what demand?
Based on what? I'm sorry?
Based on what demand? So in other words, right now in Palm Coast, usually one of the chargers in front of City Hall is, it's almost always empty. So what is the actual demand on that? Because that's theoretically.
Actually, I just have to correct you there. So I probably hear more than anybody, and it's almost always full.
Well, okay, so, but I guess that's my question, is what is the actual demand for
I
these
think
chargers?
you're asking a question, so,
Well, hold on, can I just answer
so
that
we're,
real
we're
quick?
on a desert island, and, you're asking, what is the demand in a place where something doesn't exist? I mean, you can't possibly know that.
Well, you can project it, though. The Tesla Model
Can
Y
project
is the
it.
best-selling car in the world.
And just that 316 kilowatt isn't going to be a fixed amount. It's based on how often that machine is utilized. So it could only be 100 kilowatts per month if it's seldomly utilized.
I just
So-
want to make sure that because this is it's part of the federal infrastructure plan that passed from this administration. So we're already, I mean, it's not free money, right? Grants are great, and don't get me wrong, I think that if we can get a grant, and this is the decision that council wants to go with, then it's obviously great, it's an 80-20, but it's still tax dollars. And in your presentation, there's a 5-year maintenance fee. I'd like you to kind of explain that to me, because another concern of mine is if there's some type of funding for 5 years, what happens after that 5-year period? So there's financial concerns that this may look great on the surface, but it could end up costing residents more tax dollars down the road that I'm concerned about.
Absolutely, and so we considered that, and basically, yes, the grant would cover 5 years. Now, that maintenance covers if, EV chargers break, if someone hits it. What we really found about EV chargers is that it's basically if someone hits it, they're actually pretty hard to break. And then, when we're collecting the revenue off these chargers, we can always make sure to bank for the next 5 years. So we can have that warranty covered by the revenue that's being generated by those chargers, and then also part of the bidding process, what we'll have the option to do is actually write into our bid is that after 5 years, if the city of Palm Coast does not want the chargers, and this is across the whole board and the whole region, is that the charging company that we decide to go with has to come to remove them at no cost.
Right, but so to me that we're still using tax dollars to possibly only use something for 5 years and then remove it if we don't want to maintain these on our own afterwards. So it's still a concern. I don't want to waste money. So I guess for me, I don't see enough data in front of us here today to make sure that A, there's an actual demand for these chargers, B, that we are actually going to get a return on investment, and then C, after this 5-year period, that return on investment is still in existence because this grant is only present for 5 years. And then, and I just want to, has Flagler Beach and Bunnell, have they already voted to submit the same grant application?
They're voting this week, but they do seem to be moving forward from what I've understood.
Because I know Flagler County did not, so I just want.
Well, actually, they put a letter to reserve the right to do so.
Another question.
I know, but they still voted not to do the grant for some of the same reasons I'm concerned.
How long does a charger last before it has to be replaced?
So that just depends, but it could be anywhere from 7 to 10 years or even longer than that.
Do we have a study on this? Do we have some facts on how long they last? Or how long do they last before they need, to be repaired? And I don't mean from somebody hitting them, but electronically. I mean, they've got computers in them, wires, circuit boards, whatever.
How often do you need to replace a gas pump? I mean,
No, but gas pump is a private business, so if I own a
I
gas
know, but I'm just saying
station and I have to
mechanically, like-
repair a gas pump,
but
it's
mechanically,
my
like
gas
how long
station.
for sure, but I just mean
Yeah.
like mechanically, how long do these things hold up?
I mean, will we need to hire staff people, employees to go out there and maintain these things, repair these things? How will that
Absolutely
work?
not, because that would be covered under the warranty if it did go down.
They're warranted during that 5-year
Then
period,
5 years later, we're responsible for the warranty,
or we can
or
bail.
repairing it, or
We
replacing
go under
it.
contract with whoever manufactured it. It's a pre-manufactured unit. Once the infrastructure and the electrification is in place to it, this comes as a prefab unit and gets set in place, and it's something that we would negotiate with the manufacturer if we wanted to do an extended warranty or a service plan of beyond that 5 years.
So, do we have any example or any statistics from any other city around our size who has already done something like this? And whether or not they've made a profit or they've had a loss?
Well, I would say the EV landscape, actually, the cities are incentivizing through free charging. So a lot of cities are not looking to charge right now at this moment. So the cities that are size are not, most of them are just charging per kilowatt hour and just getting their utility costs back.
Now,
The only other question that I had
Yeah.
too, and I apologize, Mayor, because I do, so in reading the other supporting documentation, which was in the packet but wasn't a part of the PowerPoint because it is pretty heavy, there's reference to these things needing to be installed in lower income areas that we need to consider, you know, we did take into consideration equity and things of that nature. So I'm also concerned about your proposed locations. Will it meet those requirements? And if it doesn't meet those requirements, are we truly prepared to put them in these locations? And then as kind of a piggyback to that question, is there a demand do we know that there is a demand in lower income areas here in Palm Coast?
So any federal grant that's going to come down is under Justice 40, which means that overall, out of 100% of grants that are awarding, 40% of that's going to go to low income. That doesn't mean that your grant application needs to be 40% low income. And how our grant application works actually is that we come close to what is designated as an environmental justice area by the EPA, which is what the EJ 40 rule follows, but we are actually technically not in an EJ area. So this grant would not actually qualify under low income. We can say we're close, we can say we're neighboring to that, but it would not fall under that area.
So the proposed locations don't violate that necessity to really consider those things in the application itself?
No. And now when the DOT looks at it, will they, you know, maybe grade a point lower on our application? Possibly.
So one of the risks I've heard that you were concerned about is that if you're using tax dollar, first a question, the 20%, can the value of the land that these chargers are placed on be a part of that 20%?
No, not existing land. If we had to purchase land to install these and the city spent dollars, then yes, but not existing city-owned land.
We can in-kind it, possibly.
This is the first time they offered the grant. The detail is very vague. I think they're still
So
working
what
out
I'm asking
whether-
is for the taxpayer's point of view. So if we dedicated a piece of land at the park that you're suggesting, can the value of that land, as we appreciate it, be used against that 20%? What I'm trying to reduce this use of the taxpayers' funds so that we are investing these dollars and getting a better return than the dollars that we spent.
I can appreciate that. I think my concern is just that I don't feel like a government should be installing these types of, or spending tax dollars to install more of these types of stations. I understand that, you know, a lot of it will be grant money, but it's limited to the 5-year plan. And why we wouldn't engage a private partner and then figure out a way to get revenue from that, but have a private partner do that.
There is a potential opportunity with this grant where if the city chose to say, hey, I want someone else to provide that 20%, and they do offer the ability to partner up with someone where they fund the 20%, but then they get to charge electricity, they get to charge what they want, and you're in a 10-year agreement with them for them to make back their 20%, and once they make that the 20%, then they may offer a split with the city for a certain period of time beyond that. But they're the ones that are going to be making the profit and setting the rates of what they charge.
So I think that's exactly what we need. We need a private enterprise partner to come in and say, we'll partner with the city. We're an individual business. You use your grant. We'll run the business and we'll split the profits with you. That's fine.
So-
Would that be us doing it on our own, I
But
think
just,
is absolutely insane.
that's a good idea, but let me just help you with it just for a second. This grant application has an upcoming deadline.
Yes.
So there's no guarantee that you
I
would
have a
find such a
feeling with
partner
all
in
the
advance of it.
New Deal nonsense, this grant will be out there till the day I die.
Well, I will say, we don't have to make any decisions on the 20% today. We will have purchasing power. There will be multiple options that will come before the council if we're awarded this grant on what we could possibly do. And what Carl said today, that 20%, that's a deal that's on the table right now.
So if that grant comes our way, we could decline it at that time?
You could,
Yes.
you could decline it, but federal grant, but if awarded a federal grant and you decline, it's not looked at as a
So
grant.
there's another side to that question. If we were to engage in this process for this grant, does this open up the door for other grants through the federal government?
Absolutely. And one thing with federal grants is they care about partnerships. They care when we're partnering with our sister cities or our organizations or educational institutions. And I think that not only does this open up other federal grants, but it opens up new partnerships that we can explore with our sister cities.
But if we found that private entrepreneur to come in during this process, that we could marry up with them and relieve the concerns that City Council has.
Find a business that wants to engage in this
Okay.
with us, and then I think that's something to consider. And that business will create tax dollars and create jobs, and that would be good for the city. And we wouldn't be competing against a business. We'd have a business involved. To me, this is not a business-friendly move.
We do already have businesses approaching us as we speak.
You become a partner that wants
To become absolutely, they are very interested.
Maintain it, service it, and split the profit with us?
After they collect their 20%.
Excuse me?
After they collect their 20% invested.
Bring us the business then.
So, okay, let's back it up for a second. What are you asking of City Council this evening?
To approve if the city of Palm Coast could pursue this Department of Transportation opportunity. We have not been awarded. If we are awarded the grant, we would come back with options.
To pursue
Just approval to submit an application.
To pursue submission of the opportunity. That's number one. Now, number two, I just need to remind City Council that you currently have all unanimously signed off, voted for a vision, a pillars of priority in your strategic action plan process, of which this is a part of.
Well,
so
maybe
just
it
to
shouldn't be a part.
Well, I mean,
Because I
so
have grave concerns again about.
so then I would have to advise you to go back and review your vote on the strategic plan.
Anything.
Well, but you voted for it.
I have concerns about this.
No, I understand.
Please understand that.
No, I do, but I'm just reminding you that we did already include this into our strategic action plan process.
Everything in our strategic action plan is not something we all universally agreed to. We all added our 2 cents. Okay, so you don't agree with everything in it. You know, I mean, so no, I don't agree with this. I'm sorry. This to me is government stepping into an area it has no business to be in. And those federal grants, by the way, come from our tax dollars. It's not free money. Taxpayers paid for it. And a lot of us are tired of paying excessive taxes for somebody's Green New Deal dream.
So off the platform for a second. So let's circle back for a second. What we're being told is that this opportunity affords the opportunity to find a private partner to build these 3 charging stations, of which we would receive a revenue stream after they get whatever their business piece is. So is that model acceptable?
That's closer to being acceptable.
Closer.
But I need to see the private partner.
Okay.
And I would think any private partner coming in would get their own grants or their own investors, actually, if it was a lucrative business.
Well, it's suggesting that a private entity can get a grant from the federal government. I don't know if that's possible.
No, they get investors instead, and that's called free
Well, no,
enterprise.
it's our municipal government that has the ability to get a grant, so let's don't confuse it
But
now.
I don't think we should be in the energy charging business.
So I'm sorry, Vice Mayor, you're confusing me.
No,
You are okay if it's a private enterprise, which this affords us the opportunity to do, so you're okay with it or not?
I'm not there yet.
Okay.
I'm not there yet.
All right.
I'd need to see examples of how this has worked. I'd need to see businesses that want to come in and make this commitment and this investment for long term. I need to see a lot more than just a federal grant. Just because the government wants to hand out our tax dollars doesn't
Understood.
always make it right.
What is the deadline for the application?
June 13th.
Okay.
So
let's finish with comments.
If I may, I think that's where my issue comes in, and I appreciate the work that you've done on this, Maeven. However, I do agree with much of what the Vice Mayor said with regards to not having enough information. If you came to us tonight and said, we already have a private company who has entered into this contract and is willing to take on this cost so that our residents are not paying for it, and we in fact can see the data on an ROI, I would be 100% on board. As it stands, I can't be because I don't have enough data and I don't have in front of me a private partner who's willing to do that. So I would encourage in the future for these types of things, because we don't want to pass up grants, that we have more information. And maybe, I don't know when this became, when we knew about this grant or when it became possible to apply for it, but I feel like we're under the gun, and I don't like that feeling anyways, because I feel ill-prepared to make a decision to spend our tax dollars.
And we're not going to be able to bring a partner with you before we even apply for the grant, because one, we don't know how much grant we're going to be awarded. So say we apply for $500,000.
You can always enter into contingent contracts, though. I mean, that is a thing. So I hear what you're saying, Mr. Cody, but you could enter into a contingent contract.
Well, I think one of the reasons why we wouldn't necessarily want to do that is because there's going to be a lot of deals on the table. The deal that I brought up today was already something that's been approached to me by a vendor. That's a real deal. That's not something that's going to go away.
We're going to have to publicly bid it out to have it out there for multiple vendors, contractor, providers to submit something. But if we don't know what we're submitting, because we don't know how much dollars we're going to get from the grant, you're putting something out there that doesn't
Carl,
exist.
listen, it's a leap of faith. It's like, yes, you feel comfortable and confident that you're going to get somebody, but it's not dissimilar to the conversation we had earlier this evening about, build it and they'll come. I understand the 2 points that you're making. I absolutely understand the desire not to interfere with, the private enterprise or private business model, number one. I would ask you, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but could this not be a magnet to entice those others to come in? Because we're Palm Coast. I'm not sure we're at the top of anybody's list to come and install EV chargers. So are you depriving your residents for an additional 5 years of having this amenity?
First place they can charge their cars at home, like Nick does.
Well, not if they're coming from another location.
Well,
they better
BJ's,
plan
for
their
instance, BJ's is going to have charging stations.
Yeah.
So we know that private companies are doing this.
Yeah, and that,
Yeah.
to me, it's a private
Okay.
enterprise thing. If there's a demand for this, if electric vehicles grow.
Right.
I mean, what do you mean if electrical vehicle
Nick,
grows?
because a lot of folks have
Okay.
a lot of hesitancy because of the life of batteries and issues and problems, and these things have caught fire. We've seen a lot of things, but people have hesitancy about it. We're all not rushing out to buy them. How many electric vehicles do we have?
All right, so
Coast? How many?
this,
2 million a year.
okay, so,
Palm Coast,
In Palm Coast, 3,600.
3,600.
well, that's according to some arithmetic, which
I think it's
don't
like
agree.
400.
So none of us have that data to speak from. So here's my suggestion, okay, and I'll need a consensus on this. I would direct staff to increase your efforts to find us an opportunity that had both a component of grant, but a component of private enterprise that would be willing to absorb the match piece so that it would fully be a recognized private entrepreneurial concern, keeping in mind that we would like to have these services provided to our residents at the earliest possible moment. And this is not the only grant that's ever going to be out there. We also know that the governor is going to be pushing for more of this going forward. So I would also like the chance to talk to Tallahassee about how much additional effort and support we can get as a community here in Palm Coast while, we're still on the merry-go-round. So I would ask you to do additional research, and I think you've heard enough from us this evening to be able to bring back a presentation, which it won't be this grant, because I understand we're at the 11th hour, and that's a little bit of the problem here, to be able to better answer some of these questions.
I will say that I've researched EV grants tremendously from listening to council and council's priorities, and there isn't a better deal right now.
Right now, but there is next year and the next term.
It'll be the same grant, yes,
Okay.
most likely.
But there may be a partner between now and then that could step in and make a presentation with you next time.
Well, we can't commit to a partner until we go out to bid.
Well,
We have to follow our purchasing policy.
Carl, I hear your point.
Right.
But if you were really good salespeople and you knew that city council was going to back you for the 500,000, provided that there was a partner that's going to come in to satisfy the vice mayor's concern and also Councilperson Pontieri's, I think you could make a case where a private provider could come in and speak to us and say, hey, we're on board if you'll go forward.
But we could do all of this if we apply for the grant.
Yep.
Say we get the grant. We put out to bid. We have multiple vendors propose options. We bring them to council. They make a presentation to council and say, hey, this is our option for you. This is our ROI. This is what the deal we're going to provide you on getting our 20% back. This is going to be our future split. Council at that time can say, we like the deal, we don't like the deal, and award the contract or not award the contract. We don't even have that opportunity.
Yeah, no, but we're still stuck with the grant.
You guys say no tonight.
But we're still stuck with the grant already. We're stuck with the grant if we don't like those proposals.
But if we don't spend any money, there's no 20% to spend, there's no reimbursement.
Yeah, but we're stuck with a grant that we don't want. It doesn't fit what we've offered you as vision, and now we look bad in the eyes of the feds, which I'm not interested in doing.
Understood.
Okay.
Can I just real quick?
So,
Mayor,
so my purpose, I'm sorry, I'll let you go in a second. So my purpose is I'm trying to offer staff enough direction to continue and to pursue this. I'm not trying to shut the concept down. I'm just suggesting that city council, and I'm going to ask each city council member in a moment, how they want to move this forward. Councilman Clufus, go ahead, and you can end with my question.
Sure. My thoughts are just that if we looked at this, if you take EV charging out of it, it's still just an investable decision for the city council to make, right? We oftentimes talk about how we look for ways to diversify our tax base. We want to have more money to spend on things, but we don't want to raise taxes. I understand that entering a private industry is something that is a philosophical pillar that we can all stand on, but at the end of the day, unless something were to change, the only way to actually make more money would be to raise taxes. This is something that, actually will provide functionality to our city. In the future, I know this is going to sound ridiculous, police cars, ambulances, everything's going to be charged by electricity. Everything's going to be electric. I know that sounds ridiculous, but 2 million electric cars a year are being produced right now. Every single one of them is sold.
If the federal government
I'm not finished yet.
Go ahead, Dick, I'm sorry.
This investment that we have before us, if we take electrical charging out of it, how is it any different than our staff working very hard, which I'm very thankful for, and I'm sorry that we're kind of putting you through the ringer up here. They're giving us an opportunity to say, hey, let us go after this grant and bring it back, and we have people. They're telling you we have people that we can figure these numbers out and make them work. I feel like we should, if it had nothing to do with EV charging, that this wouldn't be as big of a infrastructure question or like a council issue. They're coming to us with an opportunity that could potentially, and this is why we have them as staff, and their professional opinion that they're going to be able to make this work. I feel like if they're willing to put themselves out there, why aren't we willing to, as a city, say yes, and potentially we'll actually make more money than we have today and maybe be able to use that to provide city services instead of raising taxes?
Because, Nick, if the federal government offered us an 80% grant to open hot dog stands and sell hot dogs, I would be opposed to it. It's not just electrical vehicles. It's not what we're supposed to be doing. We should not be taking business away from free enterprises. If Sam's Clubs or BJ's or Costco or McDonald's wants to put these things in because they see a profit in it, then they'll do it. If they don't see a profit in it, they won't do it. But it's not for us to do that.
But with an 80-20
And I'm
split,
fundamentally
that profit
opposed
becomes
to that philosophy.
Then maybe we should sell the water utility.
Do what?
Maybe we should sell the water utility.
Well, water is one of life's essentials.
And soon, one day, I know it's hard to believe, but electricity to charge vehicles will
Yeah, but
also
we
be
don't
essential.
power
Okay,
homes.
that's,
We have an
so,
electric
okay.
company that does that.
One day, cars
We're
will be
getting
more
into a
powerful.
philosophical, semantic argument here. So, understood. Understood your point. Now, with regard to offering staff direction, I understand your position. Is there any additional direction that you can offer to staff to make their future presentations?
I mean, hopefully the demand, if we go back and we look at demand of EV vehicles, not necessarily like EV charging, if you just assume that those two things are somewhat intrinsically tied, then there's no question that EV adoption rates are going to be, or continue to increase.
Of course,
That's the way
of
the world's
course.
going. And I think that you guys have done a tremendous job, and you've offered an opportunity for an 80-20 split, which I'm not certain that I've been up here. And I know that it doesn't make a difference, but an 80-20 split, I'm not certain I've heard before. I mean, something close with like FEMA reimbursements, which is nothing like this. But yeah, I just think that this is a great opportunity, and if we remove the EV charging component from it, I'm just fearful that as a council, we would make a bad investment decision. Like, this is a very investable decision that we're making. Do we want to put the city in a position to be able to make more money and potentially lower taxes or use this for city services? I think the answer is yes, and I don't feel like we're infringing that hard on private enterprise. We're talking about 3 charging locations.
Okay. Councilperson? You've made your points pretty well. Any final comments?
No, I don't have any final comments. I think that like I said, I mean, I'm not philosophically opposed to providing something that is in need, but I don't see a demand, and that might be my fault. I don't see the data in front of me that shows that our residents will use this, that will actually get an ROI, and to an extent, you know what, Councilman Clufus, you could be right. If this were something different, rather than EV, I may look at it differently. But in our community, I don't know that EV is needed on this level, and that we should be spending tax dollars to fund something that we know private companies are in fact installing in their businesses.
Sure. So may I have your consensus to ask staff to follow the direction that they have heard from each of us this evening and bring us back the next best possibility which satisfies each of the risk factors that you have identified, but continues to offer us the diversity of revenue that we seek? I don't feel that we have a consensus here. I would prefer not to bring this to a vote this evening. I would rather have staff move forward. I think there's enough positive energy here, and I do understand that this is that grant. So find us something bigger and better that works.
And Mayor Alvin, if I can ask, I was under the impression that the EV chargers were part of the strategic action plan, and so if I could have better direction from City Council of what their vision is for EV infrastructure, so I can make sure that I bring you the best possible option.
Well, I think the direction was relatively clear. Find us an option, hopefully with a grant, or maybe not with a grant, maybe with a private investor that's willing to put these EV charging stations in without us infringing on private enterprise. And at the end of the day, we want to provide our residents 2 things. One, the service, and if at all possible, a more diverse revenue stream. If you could accomplish those 2 things, I don't really care if it involves a grant or not. I know a grant is one pathway, but if this business model is that positive, then there might be a private investor out there. We just haven't found him yet. I am strapped with a timeline. I'm uncomfortable rushing to a decision in such a short period of time. So I need everybody on City Council to agree that that would be the staff direction for this evening.
Absolutely, yes.
I agree.
Good enough?
Sure. But what questions, Councilwoman Pontieri, do you need specifically answered that would alleviate the demand questions? Because even if they come back with ROI and things like that, is that enough to satisfy your questions regarding demand?
ROI and a private company doing it. So I think, Maeven, for your clarification that you asked for specifically, I think what we determined in the strategic action plan was diversification of our revenues and how we can tap into earning a revenue from electric vehicles, like similar to a gas tax, right? So if there's a way to work with these private partnerships where maybe we give them an easement or something to that effect, where they're getting something, we're getting something, but we're not spending tax dollars to get there.
So, why don't I make it clear? So, I mean, we're giving staff direction, but don't hesitate to have a meeting to make sure. Well, no,
yes,
have another
and
one.
I agree with you.
Now you've made another big step forward. We've had this business meeting discussion tonight. So get together so that we are checking off as many of the boxes as we need to move forward. Okay?
Certainly, yes.
Very good. Thank you all. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Excuse me, do we have public comment on this?
No, we didn't vote.
We're not voting, so would you?
Is the public allowed to say anything now?
At the end. Hold it for the end, for public comment.
just the consent agenda.
Do you want, did you want to make a public comment? Did you want to make a public comment?
No. I want to make a comment about what we've been sitting here for 45 minutes with.
So if you're willing, if you'd like to make a public comment, be my guest.
Okay. I can do it now?
Yeah,
Oh, okay, good.
no time like the present.
Oh, yeah, okay. All right. Robert McDonald, Palm Coast. Okay. My first question is, how much is these electric gas pumps going to cost us to install? And why now, all of a sudden, do we need them? And if you noticed, they're only going to be located on this side of the city. Anybody who lives on the west side of the city, including the 2,300 and something houses that you want to build, they're not going to be able to have to drive all the way over here to get to them. And that's my biggest concern.
Okay.
Is that they're not going to be, you know.
Let me suggest, because we're early in this conversation, that you'll follow up with the public speaker to help with some of the answers to those questions, okay?
But again,
Yeah.
if you listen to the city staff, it sounds like, and please don't anybody take this personal, but it sounds like they're trying to hold the council hostage. And they're telling you, well, if you don't do it, it's like a used car salesman. If you don't do this now and sign this now, it's not going to be here. And you know what? I don't agree with a lot of things that the vice mayor said, but you know what? That man's absolutely right.
Okay.
I think we should put a hot dog stand out on Belterre and sell hot dogs and then turn some of that money back over to the city.
All right, thank you. Thank you for your comment, Mr. McDonald.
But really, I think we should sell hot dogs. If we're going to sell electric, we might as well sell hot dogs.
Thank you.
And I'll work for you.
Okay.
You put the first hot dog stand
You're
up,
hired.
I'll work.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is our consent agenda. I will ask City Council, are there any items within the consent agenda that need clarification or additional discussion?
No.
So then I would open up our consent agenda to the public. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on the consent agenda at this time? Yes, sir.
I've been waiting all night for this. Okay. Robert McDonald, Palm Coast. Number 11. The city attorney reads the term so well, but I'm only going to get to the long and the short part of this. Why are we going into a pricing agreement with another county to buy fire equipment? Are we going to get it that much cheaper? Because if we are, that's great. But my idea was, why don't we contact either the state of Florida, the United States government, because we're spending money for all those crazy things. Why can't we apply for money to get the fire equipment? Because, and I want to know, and I'm quite sure with Chief Berryhill running the show, that we're going to get the best of the best. There's no question in my mind.
So can I leave you to have that conversation with Chief Berryhill?
Yeah, but what I'm saying...
Chief, will you be available for the speaker? He will go through it with you in detail.
Okay.
Thank you.
May I just address the speaker? Usually when we do get these piggybacking contracts, Mr. McDonald, it's because the pricing is the best. It's usually a financial benefit to us and to the residents to piggyback these types of contracts, just as a general statement for these types of contracts.
But let Chief go through it, because he's the one that did the numbers. So I think, and he's happy to do it with you, so you can understand what his process was. Are there any other members of the public that would like to comment on the consent agenda at this time? Seeing no one come forward, I will close public comment on the consent agenda, come back to the dais. Is there any additional questions, discussions?
I'll make the motion to approve.
I have a motion from the Vice Mayor to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second? Councilman Clufus has seconded the consent, approval of the consent agenda. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed?
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. We now move on to final public participation. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on any items that were not previously discussed on this evening's agenda? Seeing no one come forward, I will close public participation. I will move forward to City Council matters that are not on the agenda. And if you don't mind, I'm going to start with two. The first one is we have a request from the City of Flagler Beach to assign two council members to participate in a collaboration of discussion regarding present and future growth and its impact on the city of Flagler Beach. There is no agenda. Well, you've seen the letter. Has everyone had a chance to see the letter?
They would be controlling the agenda, right?
Well, no, actually the letter says that we can add agenda items. But the first question, very simply, is does City Council have an interest in participating in this collaborative discussion? I'm just looking for consensus.
I think that, we're such closely, we use each other's services, residents traverse the same roads. I mean, I would be open to it, yes.
I guess my question is, what's their end game? Why are they doing this? Is there a problem?
None of us have that answer. I think you'd have to go.
Having economic difficulties?
I don't know the answer.
For us to help them?
I think you'd have to go and listen to the discussion.
Because I think if we do assign two people, we need to have some guidance for whoever goes.
Well, there's no, so, okay. This type of position is simply to go to collaboratively discuss whatever issues there are. You can't make any decisions. You would have to come back to City Council and bring back with you, just like our other liaison assignments, for City Council to discuss amongst ourselves. So the question is, and Mr. Reichman, I'm going to have to ask you a question. They've asked for two. Would it be easier for the city if we just offered one? Because I have it's a sunshine issue. Could we suggest that we'll offer up one volunteer?
I mean, there's no particular guidelines for what we have to do other than what was contained in the letter that I'm aware of.
Right. Okay.
Having said that, if you appoint two, then you have just created a sunshine committee.
Right.
And if Flagler County, submits two, then it's a public meeting of the county and so on and so forth. Not that that's a deal breaker, but it just, you're going to have a lot of minutes and you're going to have a lot of notices, and then the location is going to be an issue because there's certain sunshine requirements about where you conduct sunshine meetings under Florida law. So I don't know if, I just got this letter today. I don't know if all of those issues have been worked out by Flagler Beach. But I was surprised to see that they wanted two elected officials to be appointed to this, because that does make it procedurally more complicated under Chapter 1, under the Florida statute.
So let me, and then there's one other piece, Mr. Reichman, if I could piggyback on that as well, is there is a TDC component which could potentially represent a conflict as well, and we don't know that for sure, but could be. So let me suggest this. I'm going to ask if there would be a volunteer, because we all have agreed that we think the collaboration amongst the region, the county, and the region is important, and why not? I would also personally volunteer as a backup. As a backup, should a volunteer, if there is one, were unable to attend.
I would volunteer for this.
You're more than welcome to it. I was going to nominate the mayor, but.
No.
I'll be the backup to your backup.
I can't be available.
So, okay, I appreciate that. So we have a consensus that the city of Palm Coast will send assigned councilperson Pontieri to be our representative at their collaborative discussion meeting on Flagler Beach. There is an upcoming date. I would urge you to reach out and request an agenda in advance that you may want to review with our city manager. And I would invite each city council member prior to that date to let the city manager know if there is an agenda item that you would specifically want discussed. To answer your
I just want to
question.
make sure on this first meeting, because again, we don't know what their end game is. We don't know why they're doing this. Kind of caught me by surprise, to be honest with you. I just want to make sure that we're there just to hear what they want to discuss, and then
I think we're all
report back
very
to us.
much on the same page
And
about
she
that.
takes excellent notes. I said to her, she takes notes constantly.
Very good.
If we were in school
Very good.
together, I'd be
So,
copying
so,
her notes, but-
so we have accomplished that. Now, if I may jump right to my second piece. Since we're talking about committees or representation at other meetings and whatever, I have a listing of our current committee assignments that each of us have some responsibility for. I think you all know what your responsibilities are, and I'll just run down it real quickly. So Affordable Housing Advisory Committee is Councilperson Hyder. Flagler Schools Oversight Committee is myself and Councilperson Pontieri. Juvenile Justice Circuit 7 Juvenile Justice Council is Councilperson Pontieri. River to Sea Transportation is myself. SMA Healthcare Inc. is Councilperson Hyder. St. John's River Water Management District is Vice Mayor Danko, and TDC Tourist Development Council is Councilman Klufis. And finally, Flagler County Transportation Disadvantage Local Coordinating Board, which is our newest assignment, is Councilperson Hyder. And now we will just add to this list whatever, you'll come back and tell us what the actual organization's name is. So what I am going to ask is the following, and I hope I can get consensus here. In the future meetings, whenever it's appropriate, because I don't know when each of your meetings is scheduled, I will lead off. During city council comments at the end, I will give a very brief summary of what my last meeting represented to the city of Palm Coast, so that not only my fellow city council members are aware of what transpired at that meeting, but the public is aware that we have fulfilled our assignment and know what we are doing at these various committees. I hope you all will be in step with that.
I have an issue.
Go ahead.
I reached out to St. John's.
Yeah.
No one's gotten back to me about meetings.
So let me have you reach to the city manager,
Okay.
who maybe could connect you. You won't be obligated to do a report if there's been no meeting.
All right.
But it's time now that we
Schedule.
share what we learn and earn from these various, with our time, with the public. So are we all okay with that?
However, I've attended several find meetings.
Well, that's a volunteer. That's on you. And
Yeah,
you're welcome to comment
they
on that if you like.
have a desire to possibly help us with some dredging issues.
Good.
And they are exploring
So
that.
use
I was encouraged
public
by
comment if you want to make an unassigned announcement of what you're able to bring. That would be terrific. Great. Okay, so we're all good with that? Very good. That concludes my city council members. Thank you for your patience.
So, I'm sure we've all gotten complaints about recycling bins this week. I certainly have gotten a lot. I'm very concerned. I know there's been a lot of back and forth between us and Waste Pro and things, and I want to get past that. To me, these are recycling bins. And, I want to encourage people, they want their recycling bin, to call us, contact us, get a new one from FCC. But the one thing I don't want to see us getting into is a legal battle over these recycling bins. Sorry, Bill, but you're the guy who's going to make out, not us. Lawyers win in these type of things, not our citizens. I think we're moving forward with our new vendor. I wish them the best, but I think that we need to not get into some sort of legal battle that could possibly have us pitted against a large garbage company and just end up in court and spend a lot of money over these recycling bins. And I'd like to get a consensus on that's not the direction we want to go. Now, maybe you guys want to go in that direction, but I don't. So I'd like to hear everyone's opinion.
Bill, before you weigh in, is this a conversation that Vice Mayor and each other city council member might want to have with city manager?
Well,
About,
we have to be,
about our lack of interest or interest? whichever
first of
it
all,
may
that's problematic because she could be acting as a conduit by counting votes. So
Okay,
that's
okay.
problematic. This is the downside, typical downside of having to have these types of conversations in the public. It's just the downside of not being a private, we love private enterprise, but they've got a distinct advantage on us because they can have these conversations and we can't. So that's the downside. Now, with that said, I would observe that it's possible that some of our objectives on behalf of this council and the public is one, is if you have indicated and identified, and that is to be able to replace the recycling bins for those that have been picked up for our citizens, for their customers, as soon as possible. And I know the staff is working very hard, I'm sure you're aware, to do that, and I think it needs to be said in public this evening, that action, those efforts are going forward, and that's the first priority.
Yes.
Now, as to the second arguable priority, this is where your staff and your legal counsel needs direction, because there is a likelihood that to achieve objective number one, there's going to be some expenses.
Isn't it
Yeah,
in
let
the
me finish,
contract
let
with
me finish.
FCC that they supply these bins?
I am not aware that they are,
It is.
well, I'm not aware that they're required to replace all bins that have been removed, but rather bins that have been damaged.
I don't, see, this is
I'll defer to staff on this, but.
so convoluted,
But let me finish, if I could, Mr. Vice Mayor, and that is that regardless, there's going to be some expenses that the city has already incurred and may incur in the future. And these are expenses that the taxpayers, to your point earlier, are going to incur. Whether or not we intend to bring a claim against Waste Pro, or a lawsuit, that decision is not our decision. That is going to be your decision. There have been some preliminary discussions between Waste Pro and the city about trying to sit down and work this out. But if you take one of the tools out of our toolbox, it makes those discussions to try to acquire those funds back for the benefit of the city out of our hands.
So are you suggesting we wait until you come back to us with a
Just telling
request?
you that, if you want us to do the best possible job to try to make a city whole for its expenses, then we need as many tools as we can possibly have.
I've read an awful lot of stuff, and we all have in the media, about the contract and everybody pointing finger and who's to blame, and Waste Pro says it's their equipment and we're saying it's our equipment, and you never know what a court's going to do. You know that, Bill. You never know what a court's going to do.
No argument whatsoever.
And so my concern is, if we withhold their final payment or something like that, and they file suit against us, what are we looking at? I mean, are we looking at going into court? Are we looking at reaching an agreement beforehand? Are we looking at spending more money than these recycling bins cost? That's my concern.
Absolutely.
And
how's that for an answer?
Now,
Absolutely.
I need a little more guidance than absolutely.
It could be any of the above.
It could be.
This is a moving target.
Right.
Yeah, if I may, Vice Mayor, I think it's problematic to discuss the possibilities from here, because that could, companies listen to these discussions, similar to other contracts that have gone bad that I know you're familiar with. And so when we discuss these things from here, it almost gives the private enterprises an edge. So I would just say that generally speaking, I think we're all of the opinion that we want to stay out of court. We want to protect tax dollars for our residents. So I think that's the best general kind of place to leave it without showing our cards.
Might I suggest then that our city manager arranges individual meetings with us, and whether it's you, Bill, or someone
Well,
else?
you can request that on your own anytime.
Right.
And I would like Mr. Mansell or somebody else to have an opportunity to maybe discuss that clause in the contract.
No, I have a problem with that. Without the city managers, I'm not willing to,
Contract with FCC?
yeah, I'm not willing to ask staff to come up and start giving legal opinions on a contract.
Well, it's not, I don't think it's legal opinion, it's what it says about the bins.
Well, are you asking for a legal opinion on either ownership or use?
Well, that's why I think individual meetings might be the best route.
Well, I
to
think
go.
I think we're talking about two different things. First of all, the contract could say, you know, the bins that FCC puts out there, who owns them? The other issue is, does FCC feel that it has the contractual obligation to replace the bins that have been picked up by Waste Pro? Those are two different issues.
And I guess the third thing is, say 7 years from now, we pick another contractor, do we go through this again? I'd like to hope we'd avoid this situation.
Totally agree. That's not the issue for us tonight.
Right.
And I agree with the two questions you had. I just want to put one on top of it. Our first concern is to make sure that the service level that our community demands is maintained or achieved at the earliest possible moment. So if there are those without, they already have the service of recycling. So I know that they might have to use a bag or a box, but it's available to them today and has been since the first day. But we will get them their recycled bins. We have many hundreds, if not more than 1,000 available at this very moment. And the city website makes it very clear on how they can obtain those. And we will continue that flow until every resident that requires a bin to make it just that much easier to recycle is able to do it.
Can we get that website again on the record from the city manager?
Councilmember Pontieri, just to clarify, to your point, there was a lot of conversation in the last few moments. Could you just clarify what you're asking to be verified?
How our residents can get their recycled bins?
Absolutely. On our city website, there's a direct link. Actually is much more straightforward than creating a case. We streamlined that. You can go to the website, you can contact customer service. There's a multitude of options to be able to request a bin.
And this will cost our residents no money?
Vice Mayor, on new requested bins, and that's an important term for the FCC contract, is part of the contract through FCC. So you're talking about a couple of different things: new bins, new customers versus existing customers who have bins that were removed by the past hauler. So there's a few different variables in there that I just want to qualify. Okay. But we're making sure that that option to connect with our customer service is very easy, very straightforward, and we're inventorying those different categories as customers are becoming more aware.
Other comments by city council members tonight? Councilperson Pontieri, anything final tonight?
Did you have anything else, Vice Mayor?
No, I'm done. No.
Okay. I have a couple things. So first, we had some beautiful Memorial Day ceremonies by both the city and the county, so I want to thank staff and everybody who contributed to those. Councilwoman Hyder did a beautiful job talking about her son's sacrifice and her speeches at those ceremonies, so I'm grateful for that. Touch a Truck, awesome. Everybody who contributed to it, it was the best I've been to. We had city workers out there playing with kids, allowing them to honk the horns. First responders. I mean, it was just such a cool community event. We had a lot of our Rogers Towing was out there with this beautiful, huge flag. A lot of private businesses also contributed to a wonderful event. So I just really want to commend everybody who contributed to that, and all of our city workers who sacrificed their Saturday on a holiday weekend to be out there with our families. That was just super awesome. On a more business-related note, we are likely going to be receiving some appropriations from the state via the county for conservation. And so I would encourage us to maybe start communicating with the county and the county staff on what their asks are for this money, because it's my understanding that there are some city conservation lands that the county would be interested in using those monies for. So I would just like to kind of put out there to my colleagues and to our staff, start thinking about how we can maybe use those appropriations to really get some really good conservation land in the city, and just be very open-minded about also land that could be purchased in the westward expansion, as well as we, the pump goes 2.0, so to speak, as we're looking to do the MPD, maybe start to focus on some conservation lands out that way as well.
No comment.
I just wanted to commend staff for their awesome events. I'm thankful that I traveled safely to New York and I'm back, and I'm thankful for you guys allowing my absence of this last workshop, but I have no further comments on that. Thank you.
Good, thank you. We're glad to see you back. With that, I would ask City Council, do you have any final comments?
City Council? City attorney has no final
All right,
comments.
city attorney, all right. Yeah, it does say city attorney. Anything? City manager, do you have any final comments for this evening?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Okay, then with that, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Second.
Favor? Aye. Thank you.